Good evening and welcome to our Tuesday, April 19th, 2022 School Board regular meeting. The time is now 6 p.m. The school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission is in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. We will start by having the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Sampson. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Mrs. Tuttle, can we please get the roll call?
Mr. Rhodes,
Here.
thank you. Colonel Williamson by Zoom. Colonel Williamson. He is online. Colonel Surrey is expected by Zoom. Mr. Sampson,
Here.
thank you. Mrs. Matheson,
Here.
thank you. Mr. Doran,
Here.
thank you. Mrs. Sanderson,
Here.
thank you. Ms. Marati,
Here.
thank you. Mrs. Smith,
Here.
thank you. Mrs. Luke,
Here.
thank you. The board has a quorum.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tuttle. We are pleased to start our evening with the 2022 Interior Alaska Science Fair Awards. Core value, maintain high expectations and educational opportunities to inspire high achievement. The 2022 Interior Alaska Science Fair was held March 23rd through the 26th. It featured 350 projects from 24 schools. A total of 429 students were interviewed in 6 hours by 49 community judges. Michelle Dammel, curriculum coordinator, will present the awards at the podium.
Fair. We were very excited to be back in person this year. We had 2 years of online, but it was much more fun to have the kids talking to the judges. We loved having all our young scientists share their enthusiasm for scientific inquiry and curiosity. So every year we highlight some projects to share with the school board, and the Fairbanks community has always been very generous in their support of our community awards. These awards reflect the organization's mission, and it's a wonderful way for students to see how science plays a part in everyday lives and potentially could be an occupation for them. All of these students took a problem or phenomenon, did some research, made sense of the issue, and I'm excited to see what projects they may do in the upcoming years. So our first recognition this evening goes to Blair Shoby, a 3rd grader from Crawford Elementary. So if Blair could come up. Blair won our logo contest. She forgot to wear her shirt though, so I wore it for her. This is what her logo was. So every year we have a logo contest, and we're also very thankful that Jolly Roger Printing helped support the science fair by printing your shirts. I'd also like to point out that Crawford also won the Music in Our Schools logo contest. They had a 6th grader that wins, so they're rocking the logo contest this year. The second thing we're going to recognize is one of our community sponsors is ABR, which is an environmental consulting firm here in town. They recognized 2 projects. One of the projects was Mrs. Marquis' 4th grade class at University Park for their project on a lynx, and they have a cool story. A colleague, I think, of Mrs. Marquis hit a lynx on the way to work and killed the lynx. Is that how it went? No? Oh, Miss Hill killed the lynx on there. Oh. Oh, there you go. And so their project was all on links. So Ms. Marquise, you can stay up here, Blair, because we're going to have you go walk through, take a picture. So if Mrs. Marquis' class representatives and her, she could come up. That's good, that's good. And then you'll just stand up here and then we'll take a picture of all of you. Another one that ABR recognized was Savannah Palmer, a third grader from Weller who did her project on the always popular moose poop. So come on up, Savannah. And grab this. Perfect, and just have a stand over there. One of our other community organizations that comes is Shannon and Wilson Engineering. They always pick engineering projects. Both of these projects had great engineering implications this year. Leo Tape, 7th grader from Randy Smith. Come on up. His project was all about the woodshed glaciers, the glaciers that come off your buildings that we've all seen or have in our yard. And then Chelsea Mayo, a 2nd grader from Barnett Magnet, on her project on CO2 and ventilation. The Director's Awards are in honor of Doug Schammel, and for people that have been here a long time will recognize that name, but he was a professor at UAF who was a vital part of the start of the Interior Alaska Science Fair over 30 years ago. He chose the projects he felt encompassed the essence of the fair. We have continued this tradition since his passing in 2005. So I would like to recognize 4 of the Director's Awards projects. The first one is Kinley Carey, a 4th grader in Best, on Harding Lake bacteria, ice, snow, and water. And I want to talk about Kinley's project a little bit. This project exemplifies what we want projects to be, authentic problems in a student's world. And it was my understanding that she did the project on water, correct, a few years ago, and then this year increased it a little bit more and did it on the ice. And the president of the Harding Lake Association saw her project published. We had an article in the News Miner, reached out to me and wanted to get in touch with her so he could present to the Harding Lake, she can come present to the Harding Lake Association. So that's exactly how we want science projects to work. So, Iman Smith, a kindergartner from Wood River, is he here? Oh, there you are. So besides being an amazing project, I think he gets an award for just having the coolest name. It's called Fungi in the Neighborhood. And it was all about mushrooms and what a better place to discover science happening than his own neighborhood. Lincoln Alberg, a 2nd grader from Barnett. His project was very useful on what is the best de-icer for Alaskan roads. I see a future in working with the Department of Transportation. The last one I want to recognize is Breslin Carey, a 1st grader. Come on up. And she researched the snow and ice thickness after our Ice-mageddon in 2021. So these are some representatives of what the amazing projects were that we had in the science fair this year. Oh, I was like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't recognize him. Had a moment of panic. But these were some of the great projects that we had this year. And they're always amazing. So if you ever get a chance to come during those days, it's always the week after spring break. We're always at Pioneer Park, fingers crossed. And you can see some amazing, and we always are looking for judges to hear all these kids talk about all their amazing projects. So I want to thank the parents, teachers, and community judges and everyone for making this year's science fair a success. And you guys can go and shake hands or high five the school board members. So I'll have you, Ms. Marquise, you can lead.
Oh, I get to lead.
You can be the,
Follow me, guys.
be a teacher, follow me. I know.
Thank you so much. It's always so exciting to have all of these students here in this boardroom. It always makes our evenings so much more exciting to see all the work that they're doing in their classroom. So thank you so much to all the teachers, support staff, parents, families who supported them in their projects. It's amazing. Next on our agenda, we do have the 2022 John Kelly Scholarship recipients. Our core value is to maintain high expectations and educational opportunities to inspire high achievement. The following Fairbanks North Star Borough School District students were the recipients of a $1,000 John Kelly Scholarship. Chuck Lemke with the Fairbanks North Star Education Foundation will make the presentation.
This is always a pleasure for me, and I know it's something very special within the community. If you're a parent who has a student, and I would hope, I don't know if I'll be around when these young people are there doing it, but nonetheless, we should be able to have this continue on well into the future. And this is the type of inspiration early on that will help them do a very good job to be considered. We take a look at, grades are part of it, or activities are part of it, what they do in the community. There's a lot of different metrics with which we look for and evaluate students in that. And like I tell them, the challenge is not who's going to get one, it's who doesn't, because we just have a limited amount that we have available each year. So I would like to thank all the parents and the community for supporting, because a lot of these people are even out working. So I don't know who's going to be here tonight, because this year it was still even done virtually, but it's still extremely rewarding. So we have 18 individuals who are this year's recipients, and they're from several different schools here. From Lathrop High School, we have Macy Dane Zweifel. I don't know if she's here, but and you can applaud for any and all these. That doesn't cost any more. Okay, from Eielson, Sarah Mae Klein. Also from Eielson, Gavin A. Martinek. Eielson, Ryan J. Chura. And it's a long ways to travel. Of course, the roads aren't as bad now, but okay. And also from Eielson, Brandon Michael Polsky. And once again, I do a lot of the work with this, but then I'm also the one that gets the reward of having a chance to meet, talk with, and discuss, this with the students. As a teacher, I know what a transcript looks like, and it's in black and white. And what they're able to do is add some color to it. A transcript tells me what they've done. It doesn't tell me who they are or what helped them get to where they are in their lives now, much less where they're going to be going. Some of the considerations for scholarship is, rather than having them write a paper about something they care nothing about at a time of the year when they're busy with everything else, and they don't know if anybody's really going to read them, or if they already have who's going to win it picked out. And I can guarantee you that is not the case. This is something they show up. There are a couple of considerations. Number one, that they have to be a graduate of one of the Fairbanks schools, and then they go to either UAF or CTC, and so that's how it's applied. And what happens there is names go into the district, names go into the university, and then names go to the Key Bank Trust, who are the people who manage this money. We don't touch it. We're not any part of that. They forward the funds to the university, and it will get deposited in each student's account. So this isn't going for that new snow machine that they wanted, or something like that. This goes for books and tuition and things that are necessary on campus, although a snow machine would be very nice and necessary to have on campus. Okay, the next group here is from North Pole, Samantha Robbie Wheeler, Robbie D. Wheeler. And here she is in person. Those aren't your school colors, are they?
No,
Oh, okay.
I
That's okay, it looks good. Yeah, I couldn't wear that, but. Okay, next from North Pole, Jonathan Patrick Ford. Congratulations. Next from North Pole, Andrew Joseph Carrier. Okay, from North Pole, Kaylee Marie Ives Perez. Okay, North Pole, Kaylee Marie Kingery. From North Pole, Laura Jane Studdy. North Pole, Kara Rochelle Whitty. Congratulations. You're welcome. North Pole, Kylie J. Lambries. Congratulations. From North Pole, Elisa Marie Hanson. North Pole, Joseph Lee Crawford. From North Pole, Mariah Lindsay Duffield. Congratulations. And from North Pole, Mercedes Melissa Lindquist. So trust me when I tell you, as a community, we're in good hands. These people have career paths and goals that everybody here in one way, shape, or form has helped them along to be successful to this point. Certainly the board and the district, all the teachers, the faculty have all helped make this and be a part of their families. That's when we take a look at this, we see how active they have been, how much they have really earned the consideration for any of this. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you for having the opportunity to make it. And yeah, there should be something special for making it, even though it's not a mandatory thing. Thank you. And thank you all for being here and supporting this effort. She'll take a high five here.
Oh, no, I was just, so I don't forget this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Well, hey, it's worth it. It's what we're here for.
Thank you so much. We love seeing our students, like I said before. Next on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Core value, center everything we do on the student and student learning. Consent agenda items marked with an asterisk are considered routine items not requiring public discussion by the school board. Unless removed from the consent agenda, asterisk items will be automatically approved when the agenda is adopted. Questions concerning these items should be directed to the administration before the meeting. If the superintendent or the member of the public wishes to have an item removed from the consent agenda, the request must be made to a board member anytime prior to the start of the meeting. The board member has the discretion to accept or deny the request. Only a board member may remove an item from the consent agenda. If an item is removed from the consent agenda, it shall be considered separately as the last item of new business. Asterisk items will then be adopted by one single motion. Can I get a motion?
Move to adopt the agenda with consent items.
Second.
Awesome. Mrs. Tuttle?
Colonel Williamson?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Surrey?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Matheson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Yes,
Thank you. Motion carried.
thank you. Can we please have the presentation on agenda items?
The board has accepted the following grant awards in the amounts of $120,970.91 for the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund, Homeless Children and Youth from the United States Department of Education through the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development per fiscal note 2022-50, and $1,000 for the safety equipment and training grant from the Alaska Public Entity Insurance per fiscal note 2022-53. The board has approved North Pole High School's request for its track and field team to fundraise approximately $1,700 through Krispy Kreme donut sales, with proceeds to be used for the team travel and the purchase of track and field equipment. Boreal Sun's request to send Ms. Gaff's 5th grade class to Anchorage, May 4th through the 6th, 2022, to participate in the 5th grade pentathlon at no cost to the district, and if any local, state, or federal travel health warnings are issued, the students will not travel. West Valley High School's request to send between 4 and 10 students and chaperones to Nashville, Tennessee, June 21st through the 26th, 2022, to participate in the 45th Annual HOSA Future Health Professionals International Leadership Conference at no cost to the district, and if any local, state, or federal travel or health warnings are issued, students will not travel. Boreal Sun Charter School's request to raise approximately $1,500 to offset the travel expense to send Ms. Zakowski's 8th grade class to Anchorage, Moose Pass, and Seward, May 9th through the 14th, 2022, to expand students' knowledge of Alaska, with the charter school paying travel costs for expense not covered through fundraising. And if any local, state, or federal travel or health warnings are issued, the students will not travel. And North Pole High School's request for its music department to raise approximately $120,000 to send approximately 40 students and chaperones to Disney World in Orlando, Florida, March 11th through the 19th, 2023, to engage and work with other music organizations outside of Alaska at no cost to the district, and if any local, state, or federal travel or health warnings are issued, students will not travel. The board has accepted the donations of $3,000 from the Golden Heart Reading Council, Susan McIntosh, to the Teaching and Learning Department to be used to support the district's 2022 level literacy training. $3,000 from Shannon and Wilson Incorporated to the Teaching and Learning Department to be used to support the 2022 Interior Alaska Science Fair. $2,414.98 from the Joy Elementary PTSO to Joy Elementary School for the school's yearbook. $1,000 from the EOSC Welfare Fund to Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School to help purchase the airfare for students to travel to the Alaska Association of Student Governments Conference in Kodiak, Alaska, April 2022. $10,000 from the Malamute Football Booster Club at Lathrop High School to support the school's football programs. $1,000 from the VFW Post 10229 to North Pole High School to offset the travel expenses of the school's rifle team. And $2,000 from the American Legion Con Miller Post 30 to North Pole High School to offset the travel expenses for the school's rifle team. The board has accepted the monthly management reports for March 2022. The board has approved the personnel action reports from the period March 25th through April 7th, 2022, and the minutes from the April 4th, 2022 special meeting and April 5th, 2022 regular meeting as submitted. The board has acknowledged the personnel information report for the period March 24th through the 27th, 2022, the budget transfer report for the period March 1 through 31, 2022, the board's reading file, and the coming events and meeting announcements.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Moline. Next on our agenda are public comments on reports and non-agenda items. These include input, ideas, and suggestions that are welcome and encouraged regarding the school district's fiscal year 2022-2023 school year budget, along with public input on salaries, benefits, and any other contractual items regarding the ESSA, FEA, and FPA negotiations. Core value: engage with students, family, staff, and community to support student success. Public comments on reports and non-agenda items are limited to 2 minutes per person for a maximum of 1 hour. People who have signed up in advance through the school board office to testify in person or by Zoom will be called upon first, and if time remains, anyone else who is in person will be invited to testify until the 1 hour time limit has been reached. A person testifying shall state their name, spelling their last name, and their city of residence for the record. Board members may ask questions for clarification. Although there is time at the end of each meeting for school board and superintendent comments, some concerns may not be able to be addressed immediately, as additional information may need to be gathered. Public input is welcome and encouraged regarding the school district's fiscal year 2022-2023 school year budget, along with the public input on salaries, benefits, and any other contractual items regarding the Education Support Staff Association ESSA, FEA, or FPA negotiations. First on our list, we have Miss Sandy Ryan. If you will come up and state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes.
I never like testing this thing first. Okay, that's not bad. Hi, good evening. My name is Sandy Ryan, R-Y-A-N. A proud 28-year teacher in Fairbanks North Star Borough School District, and I currently serve as the FEA president. I reside in Fairbanks. I would like to take a moment to thank you as our elected board members for the work that you are doing advocating for our students in Juneau. I know that many of you have had the opportunity to go to our Capitol and meet with not only our interior delegates, but also members of our respective finance and education committees. Furthermore, I believe that the message that our legislator is receiving from you, our fiduciary responsible people of our school district, and from our teachers, counselors, librarians, psychologists, and therapists, is that we can no longer attempt to do more with less. In fact, we are doing less with less, and our students are paying for the price. Hearing the same message from certified staff and from school board members and management is powerful, and it's resonating in the halls of the legislatures in Juneau. I ask you, why not take it to the next level? Why are we not advocating for the additional funding from the borough? I certainly recall they told us that they should be our fund balance. Why am I not seeing op-eds from board members and management detailing the needs to increase borough funding? Our individual testimony is valuable, but as you are elected officials and leaders of our school district, shouldn't you be out front taking this charge and asking not just for a small increase, but for funding that truly represents our needs? Our students deserve it. Again, thank you so much for the work and the continued advocacy in Juneau. It's important and it's needed. However, let's all roll up our sleeves and get the work done here at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming this evening.
It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Next, we have Cheryl Hurley. If you will state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify. You are totally fine.
Thank you for having me. My name is Cheryl. Last name is Hurley. I am going to be I'm talking on student safety. Got 2 minutes. I am a college instructor and also a former employee of the Fairbanks School Bureau. And I thank you for having me. I am going to talk about student safety and staff safety. I was working at Arctic Light Elementary as a teacher assistant, and I was actually going to apply to be a FEA teacher, but things changed. My focus on safe environment. How do we act within the school district? And within the school district, we should act with ethics. I teach ethics with college level. And what are ethics? What's being professional? And I feel like when I made a report regarding a certain somebody, and I can't say because of HIPAA law, I went and did the right thing by going ahead and to my supervisor, my principal of the school, saying there is something wrong within the classroom. So this is concern for safety for all children. I don't care what age 5, all the way up until 12th grade. And we are instructed as staff members, both FEA and the ESSA, that if there is a known case of child abuse, we have 24 hours to make a phone call. I did that. I went to the principal. I went to leadership. I went to the school board saying this is what I did that was right to protect students. So how do we provide a safe environment for both staff and students at all cost? So I decided that, you know, maybe this isn't my call being a teacher, so, but I'm a college instructor, so I still have a job. But my question to the school district, how do we change? How do we navigate child abuse? Child abuse should never happen.
Thank you for your testimony. That was
You're
time.
welcome.
Ms. Matheson?
Were you put in any danger for reporting?
Yes, I was confined to a hostile work environment, and I was subject to abuse myself. And I can't name names, because I am actually subject to lawsuits. So I gotta be very careful. I was put in that predicament, and I did everything. My husband's in the military. We reported it. So that's all I can say about it. It's under investigation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for
Appreciate
your
it. Thank you.
testimony. Next, we have Natasha Prax via Zoom. Hello, Natasha. Can you hear us?
I can.
All right. If you'll start by saying your first name, spelling your last name, give us your area of residence, and then you will have 2 minutes.
My name is Natasha Prax. My last name is spelled Prax, and I live in Fairbanks. Should I start?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, you may start.
Thank you. Dear school board members, as a founding member of Boreal Sun Charter School, my husband and I currently and historically have served on many governing boards for the school. After I last spoke with you at the meeting for charter renewal last year, a panel of representatives met with the school board. I witnessed many members of that panel, who are acting as fundamentalist evangelical anthroposophists, assure school board members that no anthroposophy was present in our classrooms or in the curriculum. This is absolutely false. Since this meeting, staff and board members at the school have repeatedly publicly stated that changes to the pedagogy are in fact impossible because these changes would alter the charter. Let me reiterate that they do not believe that they can remove the extremist, occultist, racist teachings of Rudolf Steiner from the pedagogy because it would violate the charter. They have relentlessly made this argument to the school community while telling you there is no anthroposophy in the school. The primary goals of this unique group of purist anthroposophists appears to be serving Rudolf Steiner, strengthening the adherence to anthroposophical Waldorf through staff and parent education, and doing this above the very real and often stated needs of this public school. We have witnessed multiple intimidation tactics, the latest being to shift blame to our school's head teacher, who has angered them by engaging in the mandates this board negotiated with her. The school board needs to be aware that the guiding anthroposophists within our school power structure have been dishonest and actively breaking down community building efforts and discussion of concerns. These concerns are not unfounded, and the cultic adherence to Steiner and anthroposophy are making needed growth within the school impossible. Boreal Sun Charter School is not meeting its promise to you, the school board, that they are working on resolution. They are only working towards furthering anthroposophy overtly and covertly when necessary, which is why I find it disheartening, alarming, and necessary to ask you to review the contract yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, and that is time. Thank you for your test. Oh, we have Ms. Marani.
This is actually to the chair. When is the review for the charter schools for Boreal Sun up next? Do you know?
Yes, Mrs. Tuttle, could you remind me which date that was at our meeting? I don't have our paperwork in front
I
of me.
believe it was May 17th.
We have our charters on May 17th and June 7th.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Matheson, did you have a question? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we have Joanne Sexton. If you will come up, state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Sexton. I reside at 509 Monroe Street, Fairbanks, Alaska. I've been a resident for 51 years, and I'm here, and it's a different topic, and it's in regards to the maintenance of the parking lot at Lathrop High School and Hammy Pool. I do attend Hammy Pool, and I'm talking to you about the access for the handicap and crossing the street. And one of the patrons fell and was found between two cars, and she had been there at 20 below and frostbit her 8 fingers and her face, but she was found by another person that came through. I've made several calls to find out where exactly this responsibility lies. And between the borough and the school board, it is the school board issue for the parking lot and maintaining it, because it's a facility, the school, I guess. And I know you've got more important things to do, and then you say, huh, this lady comes here now in April. Well, I've been trying for 4.5 months. I would like you kindly, respectfully, to consider how you address your facilities. I've talked to Daniel DeGraw, and he told me he has 36 facilities and very limited people to address maintaining all the properties that you have. So you have major things with your curriculum and everything going on, and I understand that. But you need to also address the needs of the senior citizen population that grows every year. And we still maintain properties, and we still are a part of the community, and we still feel in our heart we're Golden Heart community, so we're going to support everything we can. So kindly, respectfully, in one of your agendas, address facility maintenance, one, along with the other concern of busing, which I'm throwing in there, but it's with the parents that are really suffering. Am I done?
Yeah, that was time.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for testifying this evening.
Thank you for your patience.
We appreciate you. Susie Cornell, if you will state your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Good evening. Get my chair up here. Thank you for having me. My name is Susie Coronel. See if I can get this right. My last name is spelled C-O-R-O-N-E-L, and I'm a teacher of emergency services at West Valley High School, and I reside in Fairbanks. Did I get it all? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm here to address the core values from the strategic plan of 2020 to 2025, which states how will we behave. The first one is conducive learning. Ensure a class size that is conducive to learning. In times like these, are we maximizing the benefits of smaller classes where the industry standard for instructor to student ratios are small? Or are we just canceling programs and blaming it on a numbers problem, when we all know that numbers are low across the board, which is why we're in a budget crisis, right? Student-centered, center everything we do on the student and student learning, and I was glad to hear that said tonight. Are we student-centered when we cancel their entire program mid-course? When we tell them that without their own transportation, their entire life's plan just has to wait, even though we have other options for reductions in funding? Respect, embody respect for the diversity and dignity of all. Are we respecting students and staff when we cancel programs without regard for industry, student, family, and staff input? When we hire subject matter experts but then leave them out of critical conversations? Safe environment. Provide a safe learning environment. Is outsourcing programs putting students on the road in harsh winters safe for students? High expectations. Maintain high expectations and educational opportunities to inspire high achievement. I heard that one tonight too. Outsourcing courses is limiting educational opportunities. Not all students can access an off-campus class, but we all know that you only plan to outsource one of the program at West Valley that's on the chopping block, and that others will simply be eliminated. How does that meet the intent of this particular core value? Collaboration, engage with students, families, staff, and community to support student success. Everybody's communicating, but you're not listening. Your community is communicating with you, your staff is communicating with you, your students are communicating with you. You're telling them that they don't matter when you don't listen to them. Innovation, be innovative and adapt to student needs.
And that is time. That 2 minutes goes so fast.
Well, it's happened fast, thanks.
Thank you so much for coming and testifying this evening. We appreciate you. Next, we have Drake Arian. Perfect. State your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes.
Hopefully, okay, this works. Hello, my name is Drake Berrien, last name Berrian. I reside in Esther, Alaska at the Esther Volunteer Fire Department, and I'm a full-time paid firefighter at North Star Volunteer Fire Department. Tonight, I'm here to speak to you guys about the planned cuts for the emergency services programs at West Valley High School. Cutting these programs, including to but not limited to the emergency medical technician, the emergency trauma technician, intro to fire services, and the CNA program are not only a failure to your students, but a failure to your community as a whole. The local job market right now is wide open for people looking to get involved in emergency services. There are staffing shortages all across the board at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, at multiple fire departments in our area. The problem is that people who are applying for these jobs are being beat out by out-of-state, out-of-town applicants from Fire Explorers programs such as Anchorage, as well as an Explorer post in Washington and programs like FIGHT. The problem with this is that when these students come from out of state and out of town and they learn their craft here, they get their certifications paid for with borough funding, Fairbanks North Star borough funding, and they take their certifications and their training with them back home. How does that benefit our borough? And because these people keep leaving and coming with these staffing shortages, there's an increase on holds and a decrease of people responding on an apparatus to a medical emergency that could be one of your friends, one of your community members, one of your loved ones, maybe even you. In effect, you're putting your community at risk by not offering these students opportunities to have something that is actually applicable to life after high school. I knew that I would not be in the position that I am in today if it were not for Ms. Cornell behind me and her teaching and everything that I was able to learn from her in my time at Hutchinson High School. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony this evening. We appreciate you coming out. Next, we have Benjamin Prax.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. If you will just state your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
All right, my name is Benjamin Prax, P-R-A-X, and I live in Fairbanks. I'm speaking today as a concerned parent as well as a dismayed member of the APC at Boreal Sun Charter School. I would like to speak to the issue of anthroposophy in the school. There have been many concerns brought forth regarding the occultist aspects of anthroposophy and how it is embedded in the curriculum. There have also been concerns raised about Waldorf certification for the staff at institutions based in anthroposophy. These concerns have been met with defensiveness and a deflection from a core group of anthroposophists who occupy varying levels of the power structure within Boreal Sun and are guiding the school towards fundamentalist indoctrination. The indoctrination has been reinforced by a missionary model used by the original founders of the school and reinforced strategically over the years. The practice of hiring related staff members has perpetuated nepotism and reinforced the voices calling for stricter adherence and implementation of anthroposophy. The anthroposophists have presented a false argument that this is a school of choice, and of which parents are responsible for making informed decisions. However, informed decisions are impossible for the community to make when on one hand, anthroposophists have told you, the school board, that anthroposophy does not exist in the school, and on the other hand, that denouncing Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy would violate the charter. Parents questioning the influence of anthroposophy and in turn Rudolf Steiner have been told they are not educated in his works. This has become a rallying cry for the need for anthroposophical education for parents. As a current member of Boreal Sun's governing board, it is apparent that to reach a level of knowledge that would satisfy them, one would have to believe in anthroposophy. It has also been said that since it is a school of choice, parents can take their children elsewhere. This can be especially problematic as the educational model of Waldorf is so divergent from the mainstream. It poses a hard adjustment for children when moving to a typical school curriculum, especially in the younger grades. It is very inappropriate to suggest that a student should simply leave rather than the school governance address the embedded spiritual aspects of anthroposophy. As a governing board member, I've heard complaints that not enough effort is being put into the staff at the school to become Waldorf certified.
Mr.
Many of
Prax,
the
that
institutions.
is time. Ms. Marani.
Mr. Prax, you mentioned that anthroposophy is is alive and well in Boreal Sun Charter School. Can you give us some examples of what that looks like?
It's embedded in the curriculum everywhere. It's Rudolf Steiner's influence. It's the way the art is done. It's the way the verses are sang every day, and there's many different ways it's embedded. It's subtle in a lot of ways, but it's there, and it is through every grade level.
I have a follow-up question. Thank you. Mr. Prax, are you aware that the administration has deemed that the board has no oversight on the funds that are used for Boreal Sun Charter School?
I was not.
And are you aware that the board chair has deemed that the board has no reason to have a work session on this? Because
Point of order, clarifying questions.
these are clarifying questions.
You need to stick to the topic. And the reason why we did not have that is we've already had 2 work sessions, and we need to allow the school and the APC to work through their decisions, their final decisions, to bring to the board. It is not our purview to step in before that point.
That is exactly what I wanted to be brought up. Thank you. Were you aware of that, Mr. Prax?
No.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Prax. I care a great deal about this, but I also care about the statutes and the law. And I heard you say several times that you're part of the school governance board, and I'm just not clear on why the school governance board of Boreal Sun cannot rein this in and deal with it. What is stopping that process from happening?
Well, like I said, there's been a lot of deflection, a lot of saying that there needs to be more education. The statement about disavowing Rudolf Steiner is continually pushed back as, it's never acceptable because Rudolf Steiner is a big part of the school, and they don't want to see a separation from him.
Thank you. I recall that maybe there's a problem with your school governance. Has your board had an election? And would you say that your school governance board, your APC, is currently representing the community? Or are we still waiting on that election?
There has not been an election yet because it was a bylaw change to the charter, which needs to be approved by the school board.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes, my question for you is, the school board gave a directive to your head teacher for some changes and a change of direction And my belief is that there's been a significant amount of pushback and that it's causing a great deal of stress. And it's impeding the directive that the board gave to the charter. Would you agree with that?
Yes, there has been a significant amount of stress.
Ms. Marotti?
This is for the chair. It was brought up that the bylaw change to allow elections to help this APC is on the school board side now. Do you happen to know when that'll be on the agenda?
When they come forth for their charter school renewal, that's when it's coming forth.
Okay.
When they have their charter.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Mr. Prax, for your testimony this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have Christine Dyer.
I don't see her online.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Danielle Logan. If you will state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Thank you, President Luke and members of the school board. My name is Danielle Logan. I reside in Fairbanks, and I am the president of the Education Support Staff Association, otherwise known as ESSA. Many of our members work paycheck to paycheck, work second jobs, and after school, third jobs on the weekends, and summer jobs as well. They give all they have for the students of this community while barely having time or energy to help their own families. We are the parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, church members, scout leaders, volunteer extraordinaire in this community, and we are at our limits. Our members have always cared about their jobs and the students, but as more jobs go unfilled, as cuts take away more and more support, we are forced to skip breaks and lunches, stay past our clocking out, give that much more, because if we don't, the kids will suffer. Over the past several months, I've been hearing more and more from support staff who are angry, worried, and sometimes scared over the directions of bargaining for our new contract has taken. I don't have time to list all these issues, but I felt the need to at least make sure you have heard directly from me on the largest concern. Your proposals will result in every single support staff employee to make less money next year than they have made this year. We all know inflation has risen, but rather than work on lessening that burden, like other districts around the state, you have added to it. One member told me that her healthcare cost could increase by $500 under the district's proposal. She is a single mother of 2. That represents 1/6 of her monthly pay before taxes. How can anyone expect to afford that? Outside of the bargaining process, through the budget, you unilaterally cut 5 days of pay from support staff for next year. That is a week less of pay. These days will be spread through the year, so it's not like they can fill these missing pay days with another job. This is a slap in the face. Your bargaining proposal further attempts to cut leave days from spring break and Christmas, resulting in approximately 10 more days of lost pay in the year. So that is 3 weeks less of pay for an employee. Can you afford to have 3 weeks less of pay from your jobs? Now try doing that on the salary of your support staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Logan. We appreciate your testimony this evening. Next, we have Chloe Peterson.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. If you will start stating your name, spelling your last name, giving us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
My name is Chloe Peterson, Peterson. I live in Fairbanks, and I have 2 children attending the Boreal Sun Charter School. Boreal Sun has been under scrutiny for the past year, plagued with allegations of discrimination and racism. Here we are, a year after those first complaints, and to the outside eye, it may look like the school has done very little in response. Tonight, I would like to acknowledge the work that has been done and that is continuing to be done. Our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Council, DEIBC, has worked diligently this past year, drafting objectives for the school, developing action plans to achieve those objectives, and composing a statement promoting equity. Their work is solid, it is powerful, and it is a foundation for us to build on. And it has been met with resistance, as previous testimony talked about. But as more families are becoming aware of this resistance, support is starting to rally. The families of this school want equity. There are faculty and staff supporting DEIBC, including our head teacher who works to the bone for this school and is under attack for that support. Boreal Sun has failed our BIPOC community. Rebuilding trust takes time and hard work. So I'm here today with two requests for the school board. One, give us more time to follow the plan DEIBC worked hard to form. Families will rally behind them. But two, hold us accountable. Keep the pressure on us. Don't let up, and make sure we continue working towards excellence and equity for all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Mrs. Tuttle, did Ms. Dyer come on at all?
I don't see her.
Okay, thank you. That is all we have on our list. Are there any other people within our audience who would like to testify this evening? Seeing none, testimony, public testimony is now closed. This evening, we do not have a Borough Assembly report, so we will go straight into the President's report. The goals and objective is ensure students, staff, families, and the community are informed, connected, and engaged with this district. I would like to start by first recognizing, I apologize, one of our teachers, Miss Kim Ivy. She passed, and she was an incredible educator. And I just wanted to read something that is beautifully stated about her and about her experience here. She was a baby whisperer who could rock any baby to sleep, a children's author of 6 books, and a devoted elementary teacher who spent 19 of her career teaching kindergarten years at Midnight Sun Elementary in North Pole. She most loved being in her classroom during the school year and attending all of her students' community events. I apologize. She was such a great example of our educators in our district, who will be greatly missed. Thank you for bearing with me through that. Next thing that I would like to talk about is budget. It seems frivolous to talk about it right now after speaking of such an incredible individual. But budget, this Thursday, Mr. DeGraw, Mrs. Moline, and I will be going to the Borough Finance Committee meeting at 5:30 to present our budget to the borough. Next, our graduations are coming up. It is hard to believe that graduation is already upon us. Our first graduation is May 5th, and it goes all the way through May 13th. It is such a privilege of this board to be able to attend those graduation ceremonies. It is incredible to see the success of our students brought about by our incredible educators in our district. And that starts from our kindergarten educators all the way up to those teaching our seniors. And the last thing that I would like to bring up are the retirement recognition ceremony that we have at our next meeting, which is May 3rd. And it is going to be an incredible opportunity for this board and our district to be able to applaud and thank those educators who are retiring from our district and moving on to an incredible opportunity post-retirement. And that concludes my president's report. Next, we have the Chief School Administrator report. And this will include updates on school closure, transitions, transportation, and the budget. Mrs. Moline.
Thank you, President Luke. I would just like to reiterate President Luke's comments concerning and offer my deepest condolences to the Midnight Sun family at the loss of a treasured teacher, colleague, and friend. I would also like to, as a part of my budget report, just remind and inform everyone that Thursday night at 5:30 in the Borough Assembly meeting, the district will be presenting their recommended budget to the Borough Assembly. In the area of transportation, we're coming to the end of the school term, and at this point, we're not holding out any hope that we'll be able to restore any more routes this year. We do have one individual that is in the phase of behind the wheel training, but even when this individual completes all of the expectations, it wouldn't be enough to restore a route. So looking into next year, at this point, all things being equal, we are not going to structure routes in a way that we have a rolling schedule. We are working with Durham to make a push there, continue to recruit. And again, I would like to just comment that I think it says a lot for our district that during a time that across the nation, driver shortages has been crippling districts and other industries, we were able to recruit, train, and add drivers to our schedule. So that gives me a lot of hope for going into next year and our possibilities of having a more reliable transportation offering to our families. We do recognize that we have competition with our tourist industry as it's wrapping up. Many of our drivers also drive for the tourist industry, so we will continue to work, recruit, and train drivers. School closure planning. We continue to work with our schools that are closing. We meet regularly with the building leadership. Dan DeGraw is the project manager on this, and he works with them closely on timelines. I visited a school, Anderson, that's closing. They're organized, are ready to continue the moving process. So those plans are moving forward. The schools, the 3 schools that are closing, are planning end-of-year celebrations that honor the history of the school and those that attended. So there's a lot of activities around in those buildings around the closing. Then I would like to just also show my appreciation to Georgia Sandgren and her organization in the Purple Star School Day events that happened on Friday. We hosted a number of statewide dignitaries at the Lathrop High School celebration. We were able to visit all of the schools that operate on our military installations and just show off some of the great things about our partnership with our military. And then finally, I would, in my final comments, I would just like to mention that in the teacher retention and recruitment report that was presented by the state, one of the causes for educators that educators gave for leaving was a lack of support. Teaching has always been an important and demanding profession that requires professional development and constantly honing your craft. And I believe now tools and products are changing and evolving faster than ever before. So in an effort to support our educators across the state, across the district in their skills, myself and a group of about 60 educators will be attending the Alaska Reading Symposium in Anchorage next week. The conference will focus on the ingredients of state, district, and classroom level paths towards improvement of reading outcomes. I was in Miss Sparks' first grade class at Arctic Light on Friday as a part of the Purple Star School Day, and I was able to watch Miss Sparks work with her first graders in a phonics lesson and watch those first graders move into the world of reading. I, as well as Mrs. LaPlante, have had the privilege to spend time reading with first graders from Mr. Baxter's first grade Pearl Creek class. Why is all of this important to me? Because we are a learning organization, and one of the most fundamental skills in successful learning is in a successful learning organization is to teach children to read and love it. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Moline. Mr. Dorn?
Thank you, Ms. Moline, for that update. Just a question, and perhaps planning towards closer to the end of the year. It's regarding busing. That perhaps Durham could be invited to come give us a presentation regarding if they're doing something special to be back on track next year. Just mindful of the, I think it was 3 years ago when we approved their contract for them and their commitments at that time, then recognizing that this year had some particular challenges, but the concerns that are there for being able to fulfill their contract next year, that we're not doing a repeat of what we have and what they're doing specifically to address that over the summer so that we're ready to go at full bore in the fall.
Absolutely.
Ms. Marotti?
Thank you. In regards to the budget, I asked for talking points regarding the borough mayor's memo about pupil funding, and I have not received that back. Is that something that I can receive?
Did you include me on that email?
I believe I included board chair, Mr. DeGraw, Ms. Tuttle.
Mr. DeGraw?
I apologize. I must have overlooked that request. I will jump back in there. What talking points centered around what, Ms. Marotti?
The borough mayor's memo about per pupil funding.
Okay, it's in an email. I'll find the email and respond
The
tomorrow.
last time I asked was April 13th.
April 13th. Okay, I will find that and get some information to you.
Great. I have a follow-up.
Can we just make sure that when we email, that we include Mrs. Moline in those emails so that she can also help follow up if something gets missed?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Also, you've mentioned previously, Ms. Moline, that you have a list of priorities should we get additional funding. I did ask for that list and I have not received it. Could we receive a list of the priorities if we were to get additional funding?
Yep.
Thank you. I have additional questions, but if someone else wants to go, I can wait.
Let me go to Ms. Matheson, and then I can come back to you.
Can I be CC'd on that response? Yeah.
Yeah, can we get that to the board as a whole, as talking points? That would be amazing. Thank you. And a list of priorities. Thank you. Mr. Dorn.
Just related to that last one, when we get the list of priorities for add backs or considerations that we might have, I'm really concerned that we also at some point soon get list of priorities for any additional cuts or how we will address it. I am concerned that the borough, the mayor's budget does not include our full request. I feel a certain confidence, having spoken before the assembly last week, that the assembly may come forward, but we should be prepared both ways. So.
Ms. Marotti?
Thanks, and I agree with Mr. Doran's request for the list of cuts as well. Next, fiscal year 19 through 23, envisioning CTE executive summary stated on page 7 that the health science and emergency medical courses should be expanded and not reduced. And we've received numerous emails from educators, students, family, experts, requesting us to not make this decision to cut the EMS program from our offerings at West Valley High School. So I am hoping, I know this is an admin decision, not a board decision, but I'm hoping that other board members, through the chair, that other board members would agree with the community and join me in advocating to keep this program intact next year. And I have one more question.
Go ahead, Ms. Marotti.
The substitute that was indicted on child pornography charges, we received an email from Ms. Nadine suggesting a resource for concerned parents, and we've heard a lot from parents about the situation. Is this resource being explored or any resources being provided to parents?
I'm not entirely sure what resource you're speaking of. Was it sent to me?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so at this point in that situation, it is a personnel matter, and we are preparing supports for families. We're at this point not ready to discuss further, but more information will be coming out.
Thank you. I'm not asking for personnel information. I'm asking for families. Do you have a timeline of when that will come out?
As soon as we can make it available.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moline. We appreciate your report. Next on to, we have no unfinished business, so next on to new business, the renaming of Crawford Elementary School. Core value, center everything we do on the student and student learning. The board received a report on the possible renaming of Crawford Elementary School, including the survey results of Anderson Elementary. Crawford Elementary and Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School students, families, and staff at the April 5th regular meeting. The item is now before the board for consideration and action. Can I get a motion?
Move to rename Crawford Elementary School to Anderson Crawford Elementary School effective the 2022 through 2023 school year.
Second.
Thank you. It looks as though we have nobody signed up for testimony. Is there anyone in the room that would like to testify? Oh, we have one person who would like to testify. You will state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Yeah, this is Richard, Richard Ide, E-I-D-E, North Pole. And I hope this is the appropriate time to talk here. First of all, board, I want to preface this by saying thank you for persevering in balancing our budget and school sizes. Very difficult work, I can't imagine, but kudos to all of you. It's just a tough road to hoe. Thank you. Okay, I want to I want to say that I am extremely pleased in a new era in critical thinking opportunities for our students. Talking about the revision of the policy to provide excellent, equitable education.
No.
Is this the wrong time to do
This is the wrong, are you wanting to testify about the controversial issues
Yes.
policy? That's the next item up on the agenda.
That's what I was wondering.
So if you'll hold on to that, you'll be able to call.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You're welcome. Anyone else who would like to testify on the renaming of Crawford Elementary? Seeing none, testimony is now closed. Before I go to administration, if it's okay, Colonel William Colonel Williamson, I had emailed you requesting, I know that you had emailed us, the board, today about the renaming of the school, and I was just hoping that you could talk to the board and the public and let them know what the military's stance is and what your historian was able to find out.
Sure, President Luke, thank you. I did go back and ask our local historian what his thoughts were on renaming the school and if there was a precedent on whether or not one name should go first or the other. The historian looked at almost 1,300 officially memorialized locations across the Air Force, and there are very few co-named Air Force installations. They only were able to find 6 of those installations that had shared names. But the trend that they found was that when there was a co-named facility, it was based on some relationship between the 2 individuals by a job or an event. But there really is no set Air Force standard or precedent for co-naming or which order of the name should come first or second by rank or some other reason. And since Crawford isn't actually an Air Force facility, it's a Fairbanks North Star Borough school, the Air Force guidance doesn't really apply. But it gives you just a bit of a perspective, from the Air Force side. I believe that you have a lot of latitude as the school board to either co-name to bring the school cultures together, or to discontinue the Anderson name since Anderson and Crawford weren't really related by event. But in my opinion, I've spoken with the principals of the schools and here on the installation, and I would lean towards certainly supporting what the principals would like to do, which would be to combine the names for Anderson and Crawford to keep those cultures together. So anyways, from an Air Force perspective, I think there's a lot of latitude here, as long as it's done in a respectful manner.
Thank you so much, Colonel Williamson. We really appreciate the information that you were able to look at for the district. Administration, Ms. Moline.
We have nothing further to add.
I'd like to go back to the board. Mrs. Matheson.
Thank you. So in the past, we've had Pennell Elementary and Taylor Elementary, and when we closed those elementary schools down, we didn't transfer names over. So I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to transfer names. I think that it should stay as the one name, honoring the one serviceman. Pennell and Taylor were honorable, and we're not honoring them with an elementary school anymore, so I'm not okay with renaming the schools. And how much would it cost us to rename a school? And if we're in a deficit, it just doesn't make sense to me.
So as far as how much it would cost, I think we addressed this at an earlier meeting. The cost would be minimal. In the past, in our last conversation on this topic, we talked about the cost of changing. When Badger Elementary went to Midnight Sun, there was cost involved because there was still going to be students, that was still going to be a school. That's not the case here. So the cost would be minimal at best.
Did you have a follow-up? No. Okay. Mr. Doran.
I am very much in favor of this. I think as has been brought to us by the communities. And the difference that I see here versus I was thinking of Pennell and Taylor. I was able to sub out there as a principal long time ago. But the difference there, when Crawford came on, that was replacing those 2 schools, the same grade levels. And the board at that time considered they could have named it what they did, what they wanted, and they decided that instead of carrying on either of the previous 2 school names to Crawford. in this case, it's really a merger of the schools, and the kids that are coming from Anderson are the primary grades. And right now, Crawford doesn't have primary grades. So to me, it's a nice transition, and I think it's a nice bridging for what has been important to that community for decades. And continuing that honoring of the two individuals in this case, and really reflecting upon the fact that it is really bringing together two schools that will now be one. So I'm supportive of that Anderson Crawford Elementary renaming.
Any further questions or comments by the board? Seeing none, Mrs. Tuttle.
Mr. Rhodes?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Williamson?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Surrey?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Matheson?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank, again, Colonel Williamson and our administration team for doing all of the lifting, ensuring that we got community perspective. Next item on our list is Policy 991, Controversial Issues, First Reading. Goals and Objective. Create an environment that supports the strengths and needs of staff so they can create a safe climate where students thrive. Policy 991, Controversial Issues, is proposed to be revised and is before the board for the first reading. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve first reading, public hearing, and advancement to second reading of Policy 991, Controversial Issues.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Before we turn over to administration, we're going to go to public comment. We have some public comment. First, we have Paul Adasiak via Zoom.
Yes, hello, I can hear you.
Hi, if you could state your name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Yes. My name is Paul Adasiak, spelled Adasiak, or Alpha Delta Alpha Sierra India Alpha Kilo. I live in the city of Fairbanks, and I'm the father of 2 children in the district, one in high school and one recently graduated. Board members, I think we all want a school district where teachers are allowed and expected to treat the Nazis' massacre of the Jews and the American enslavement of captive Africans as wrong. We want teachers to convey to students that these are not merely another historical, cultural, sociological, or other educational perspective, but are actual moral evils. We want teachers never to have to both sides a moral atrocity. This is not controversial. Unfortunately, the both sidesing of atrocities is virtually guaranteed in today's political climate by the amended text to Policy 991. The board presentation, I have looked at the presentation materials, uses the language of multiculturalism and diversity, along with lots of alluring phrases like safe, supportive environment, diverse and changing society, open, constructive dialogue, and safe space. And it claims that the policy's purpose is the protection of students, teachers, and the district. But despite the crafter's best intentions, this language somehow slipped in. The schools will teach about the many historical, cultural, sociological, or other educational perspectives, but will not favor the beliefs or customs of any particular religion, sect, political or economic or social viewpoint. This will be used to prohibit teachers from teaching that Nazi atrocities were evil. It will prohibit them from teaching that American slavery was evil. They couldn't say these things because they favor the beliefs of a particular political and social viewpoint. Over time, this will compel teachers to soften students' hearts to the concerns of Nazis and slavers. And I don't want my children or anyone's children taught that kind of moral emptiness. I understand that updating this policy is some kind of needed housekeeping, but the proposed changes as currently worded would be used as a cudgel. They'll make it harder or eventually impossible to teach adequately about historical or current injustices.
That is
They
time.
can only have an
That
effect.
is,
Oh,
that
thank you.
is time.
I urge you to send this back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Julie Smith.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you will state your first name, spell your last name, give us your area of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Hello, my name is Julie Smith, Smyth. I live in the downtown area of Fairbanks, and I would like to ask you to not support changing policy 991 just yet, as there are still some concerns that I have. First, I don't know how people are supposed to determine, like teachers are supposed to determine which issues are controversial, as I had heard recently that teaching students about Romeo and Juliet had become controversial for some families here locally. I also am a little worried about changing the word process to guidance, as a process gives teachers the steps they need to make sure they're doing stuff, whereas guidance would be the additional information they need to make sure that they are teaching objectively about certain topics. Another issue that I have is that it talks about, as the previous person mentioned, religion, sect, political, or economic or social viewpoint. These things impact a lot of Alaskans. My entire identity is considered political by many people because I'm an Alaskan Native whose very recent history, the history of my own grandparents, was being colonized. And that's something that is considered political to talk about. I'm also part of the LGBTQ plus community, which is considered political, even though it is my identity and something that has been part of my culture for time immemorial. So I am asking you to do more research and to make sure that when you put this together, you are really considering how you're going to educate students about all the members of their community, so that way they understand the different needs of different people and they also learn from past mistakes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony this evening. I know that we have at least one testimony within the audience. If you will come up, state your name, spell your last name, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Yeah, Rich Eide, E-I-D-E, North Pole, and thank you for your patience. So, we have a new era in critical thinking opportunities for students, a chance for evolution and creationism to be pitted equally against one another and help students organize their facts and form opinions. That would be amazing. That would be fantastic. And that's not religious. This is talking about the foundations of the earth, how we got here and where we're going. Imagine some students realizing that I am a creation, I am loved, I have purpose in life. However, and this is a big however, if this is a means, and it sure looks like it, to further allow school employees, teachers and counselors to confuse students over sexual orientation, if dangerous experimentation and association with those who experiment is encouraged, then the school district is not serving the student's best interest. This is a dark road to begin going down. So I'm against it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Are there any others in our audience that would like to testify? Seeing none, public testimony on this agenda item is now closed, and I would like to turn the time over to our administration.
Thank you. For the presentation, I've asked Executive Director of Teaching and Learning Shane Beam to walk through the changes and a little bit about the policy changes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time this evening. My very first day on the job, I met with our superintendent, and we talked about what she had envisioned for me and my role. And on that very first day, she said, we need a policy about controversial topics or issues. What I want everyone to understand before I even start that this is not saying that we want to go out and teach all these controversial things. That's not what we're looking for. That's not the purpose of this. So we'll get into what the changes are and what the purposes are. This was read today. It's read so often. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education and a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. That is the cornerstone. That is our mission. And I believe that having a policy that helps students and teachers address the controversial topics that come up will really help with this mission statement. Other purposes: students learn about topics relevant to their lives, deepen their understanding of complex issues, and explore diverse perspectives. And they work on having open, constructive dialogue about issues of public, and that's a hallmark of lifelong learning. Being able to think about multiple perspectives is a cornerstone of democratic society. We can sit and chat and talk to each other and have different viewpoints. And that's kind of what really the main purpose of looking at controversial topics is about. Looking at controversial topics, especially for the older students, isn't necessarily, and most of the time isn't, about the topics themselves. It's about the skills that come with those, with working with those things. It is about having a safe space for students to participate in academic dialogue and for teachers to teach relevant skills. It's about making an argument with supporting statements. We have, in the last several years, this country has kind of come into a place where sometimes getting your point across is just being the loudest person. And I think this skill set that we can teach, that teachers teach, as far as having an argument, having a thesis statement, having some topic sentences, having some supporting details, that's what this is about. It's not about the topics themselves, it's the skills that go along with it. It helps give opportunities where kids learn to share ideas, to listen to each other, to disagree with someone civilly, and to listen to their viewpoint, and then give my viewpoint in a civil way. That's really what we're looking for this policy. And more than anything else, in my mind, it's about protection for students, protection for teachers, protection for the district. We need to make sure that everyone is protected, and this will give us a good step for that. It protects the students because now we don't have people giving their personal opinions that may be kind of off a little bit. We protect teachers by giving them some guidelines so they know what is appropriate. And we protect the district by having this policy. The history of this revision: there was a draft of this around over the last few years. That draft was shared in September of 2021, so last September. That draft was put out to the teachers for their feedback. 123 teachers responded to that. We took those responses and came up with draft 2. Draft 2 was then taken to the board policy committee in December. They talked about it, they debated it. They tabled it for that moment. It came back in February. They talked about it some more, and they voted on it, and it was passed, and every member voted to move it to the board as you see it written. This is the current policy. A controversial issue exists for the purposes of this policy when any material or topic evokes opposing viewpoints on the part of any group or any individual. The Fairbanks North Star School District will provide a process for the objective study for the controversial issues in order that students may have an opportunity to examine such issues. And that's it. It is 2 sentences. That's all there is. There is no other policy about controversial issues. Our teachers have no other written guidance that goes along with it. That's why we believe that we need something so everyone knows what the guidelines are, what the expectations are. You have seen and you've read what the new draft is. It's a little bit heftier. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to point out a few things. These are the first 2 paragraphs. The idea that we would be concerned, and I've heard this from many teachers, and this was part of the conversation when 123 people gave their input back to us, is that it's the both sides of things that really don't have 2 sides. And what we're looking for as far as addressing that issue is the fact that the examples that we heard earlier today, the examples that I've heard from many teachers, is that we're going to go back to what's in the curriculum. So we're not denying the Holocaust and saying that there are 2 sides to that. It's in the curriculum. It's in the board adopted curriculum. We're not looking at flat earth, because I've heard that as another example. That's in the board curriculum. We have adopted. So that's how we kind of work with those particular issues. If we look at the second paragraph, the district supports that students should have a developmentally appropriate, that's an age thing, opportunities to discuss and study controversial issues which have economic, political, and social significance in the adopted curriculum. The purpose of the study of controversial issues is to help students learn to gather, organize, evaluate facts, discern between fact and opinion, draw intelligent conclusions, and learn to engage in respectful civil discourse with others. If we only had that, that's still significantly better than the 2 sentences that we currently have. It gives more heft and more guidance. And the last 2 paragraphs, we did choose the word guidance because in our minds, the process implies first this, then this, then this, and it's not really like that. We preferred the word guidance just because it is guidance. And it's not a first you do this and then you do this. It's not a process, it's guidance. Schools will teach about the many historical, cultural, social, and other educational perspectives, but will not favor the beliefs or customs of any particular religion, sect, political, or economic or social viewpoint. That's important to put in there. We have done a lot of research from a lot of school districts, and every one of them have something similar to this to avoid the, I believe this, I like this party, I like that party, I believe, just to avoid all of that particular thing. Teachers are not supposed to be putting their individual ideas out there when they're talking to their teachers, or rather individual viewpoints would be a better way of saying it. I think that's all I have. I'll turn it over to you, and I'll be happy to answer some questions.
Thank you so much. Ms. Moline, did you have anything else you would like to add?
No, I would just reiterate what Mr. Beam said about the purpose of this whole topic. is to teach our children how to form thoughtful, well-articulated arguments based in fact, and have a conversation respectfully so that it doesn't devolve into a conversation of rude name-calling and attacks on a person. This particular policy is outlined to give bumpers, guidelines for how to do that. And so when a teacher, it helps a teacher know how to build those bumpers, and is a way to help us, our students develop deeply needed skills in today's culture.
Thank you. I see Ms. Matheson and then Ms. Marati.
Thank you. So when we were on slide number 3, we discussed, am I on the right one? Yep, 3. The diverse perspective. Okay, so it says students learn about topics relevant to their lives, deepen their understanding of complex issues, and explore diverse perspectives. So the multiple perspectives, how are we engaging our parents to be a part of this conversation? Because I'm the one that's going to be teaching my child how to respond respectfully. I'm the one that's going to be teaching my child that this is how I think about this topic. And I want to be a part of this conversation anytime there's anything controversial, because I want my child to be strong and not waver when somebody opposes their beliefs. So how, right now, I can't wrap my head around this because I don't see where parents are being involved in these conversations. And these conversations, parents should be involved in these. And then my other question is on slide 4, let me see. So to make an argument with the supporting details, I love that this part of the revision. I think that we definitely need to do this, but I am wondering, educators who have been dismissed for not having, or for having a difference of opinion, are they being reinstated because of this policy, or where do we stand there if we are changing the policies so that we are so that we're teaching not just our children but our educators to argue with their supporting details?
So as far as bringing in the parents, quite honestly, that has not been part of this conversation. And I agree, that's going to be a step of, well, how do you get parents involved in that, I think is going to be part of it. One of the things that if we run into, and we're working on the guidance that has been mentioned, is that part of that guidance will be if parents, first off, teachers should be letting parents know up front if there's something that is truly controversial. What I want to make sure that we understand is that most of the time in schools, middle schools, high schools, when teachers bring controversial issues where kids write about them, debate about them, whatever, they're generally not the giant things that automatically come to our heads. Will that come up? Obviously, sometimes it will. But most of the time, it's a lot of things about, well, should humans be allowed to eat meat? Like things like that, where kids are learning how to do that now. If, and some teachers do, as part of the curriculum, if there comes a topic that could be considered truly controversial, the way that I think that you're worried about, is that teachers should be reached out and letting the parents know up front, hey, by the way, this thing is coming, and if that goes against your values, your beliefs, then students would have an opportunity to be excused from that particular thing, and they would have something else that they could do.
Go ahead.
So I don't want them excused necessarily. I want the parents just to be informed. So things like this have come up with my children, and some teachers are wonderful about, hey, heads up, this is what's coming home, and other teachers have not been very forthcoming with what they're teaching in their class. And so, being a crazy Hispanic mom, I go through their stuff, and I investigate, and I ask them about topics that are extremely controversial that they are talking about in class. And I ask these questions because I want to know what they're thinking, and I want to know these things. So I think it's very important that in this revision that there is verbiage that says that parents will be involved in this.
So, like I said, in the guidance, we do have verbiage.
No, I want it in the revision so that we have to give our parents permission also to be a part of a child's education. I don't need someone's permission because they are my children. I know other parents do need that permission. So I want that in the revision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Marotti, then Mrs. Smith, then Mr. Rhodes, and then myself.
Thanks. We've used the word guidance a lot already. You said it was preferred. Ms. Moline said that it's a bumper. Can you tell us more about what the guidance will look like? Do we have a draft of that guidance?
We are working on that. Right now, we have 10 to 12 basically bullet points that will give guidance to the teachers. There's an introduction that talks about the purpose of the guidance and what it would look like. And there's about how parents can opt out on certain things if they choose to. And then we're working on a section about what happens when the things come up in class randomly. Because it's easy to kind of plan, okay, I'm going to do this controversial topic, and we plan it out. But then now we're working on a section that talks about, well, what happens when a kid brings up something that could be a little trickier to kind of deal with, and then providing some guidance on that.
May I follow up?
Yes.
Were experts consulted for this guidance?
Teachers, yes. Teachers were, I assume when you say experts, so that's who you're referring to?
Sky's the limit.
Okay.
As long as experts were consulted.
So basically what I did as far as the guidance is I looked at it as many, well, that's not true. I looked at probably 12 to 15 different versions that different districts have across the nation from a wide variety of places. We took that in, we brought that into my department, and we've kind of vetted it through and narrowed it down to what we thought would work for our purposes here.
May I follow up?
Yes.
For that guidance, 2 questions. Will the guidance be the AR that follows this policy?
Yes.
And then can we get a copy of that before the second reading so we know what we're approving?
We could bring it to that time and then we can look at it, yes. So can I just say that I worry a little bit about bringing, yes, I'll bring it, number one. I worry about bringing the AR and the policy. And since I'm new to this kind of scenario here, is that board policy by name is board policy and administrative regulation by name is administrative regulation. So we would definitely want to bring so you all vote on the policy and we create the regulation to do the work. My concern is that if we bring the policy and we bring the AR, that we'll have folks who like the policy and they're okay, but there's something in the AR that they want a little bit differently, and now we're voting against the policy because of this little wordage issue in the AR.
Go ahead, Ms. Marotti.
That's an interesting point, but the AR should be based on the intent of the board policy, and I would like to see the AR to confirm that it is in line with the intent of the policy before I vote on the policy. So I hear your concern, but I'd still like to see the AR before I vote on that.
Thank you.
I have several other questions, but I can wait if someone else does.
I'll put you back in the queue, Ms. Marati.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. A lot of questions that I had were already addressed by Ms. Marati. I just feel like there's nothing here. That while there are more words here, without understanding the bumpers, I can't pass the bill without knowing what's in the bill. That's basically how it is to me. Is when I first read it, I thought, okay, I'm glad we're addressing this issue, and then I don't like all the shalls. I think there should be some mays in there because it says we shall address controversial policies. Maybe we should just may them, you know? And so I thought up some little changes like that. And then I also looked at dozens of other district board policies. And you're right, they're pretty much this. But I just can't. I feel like this is an open road. And one of the problems that I have with a lot of our policies is that there are huge open doors and they don't play out the way that the board intended. Just like Ms. Marati was saying, that we need to understand that what is our intent, first of all, and does the administration understand that that's our intent before I could vote for this bill. I would also want to see the AR. And I wouldn't just want to see the AR. I would want to see more in the policy, just more. But, you know, for just some of the things that you mentioned. So if you say, well, our curriculum says that the earth is round, so we are going to not have any flat earth conversations. Is that kind of what I got from what you said was, so if students want to say, well, I think the earth is flat and my parents teach me that it is, and we're not going to have that conversation in class because it's in our curriculum that it's round. And so that addresses the first testimony that we had saying, we say the Holocaust is real, it's in our curriculum. We're not going to debate in the classroom that it's not real. And so that's great, that's fine guidance, but I just feel like something needs to put that bumper on in the policy. I don't know what it is, you know. I'm sure Mr. Doran maybe could explain how it went in the committee, but there's just not enough. And then I also worry that what some of the testifiers said, that will so-called hate speech be allowed because it is the other side of that coin. Who gets to determine what that hate speech is? Where does the buck stop? I mean, it's just this avalanche of questions that don't have answers for me. If I was saying, is a kid allowed to say, there's only 2 genders in school? I would say, let me look at the policy, and this policy would not answer my question. And okay, maybe the policy says go to the curriculum. We don't have any curriculum talking about that. It's not doing what I think we want it to do. And so I'm not supporting this in this current form, and I would want to see, I don't even want to say I want to see the AR. I just want more in the policy, more particular guidance in the policy would make me happier with the policy.
Mr. Rhodes?
I would have to agree with Mrs. Smith. In football, we use a term called eye candy. It's something used to distract, right? It says all the right things. It does all the right things, right? But there's no depth, right? There's no contingencies. There's no, there's no depth to it. You know, it's surface level, shallow. I might agree with what the intent of it sounds like, but when you leave intent up to interpretation, it becomes ambiguous. There's no set, right? And so when dealing with controversial issues, there has to be a set. Otherwise, the set comes from the person in charge who has inherent biases, right? And so they're just, yeah.
I had myself in the queue, then Ms. Marati, then Mr. Sampson, then Mr. Doran. I think the thing that I wanted to state is I don't want us to be in this situation like we find ourselves currently with our committees, where it was pretty vague, and then there's misinterpretations, and then there's misunderstandings, and then it's not effective or efficient. And the ARs and the policy are just not matching, especially because there are so many changes with the ARs or the policy, how we were running things, and the ARs weren't updated with it. And we've just found so many issues with that. I think that's kind of where I look at this point. Is it better than what it was? Absolutely. Does it say the things that we need to say in there? Absolutely. In the policy itself, I think I'm going to agree kind of with the sentiment that has already been stated. I feel as though there needs to be just a little bit more, maybe a little bit more, as you say, that like guidance, what that means for our educators, what that means for our district, what that means for administration, and maybe just understanding for the board's perspective with the AR that the district is or administration is creating, for us to understand what your intent and is moving forward with this policy, maybe before it gets put before the board for a second reading, that we can look at what the AR is, that your intent is, and see how that coincides with the policy. Not necessarily saying that we're going to sit there and dictate the AR, but just for the board's understanding of what the intent of this policy is. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Ms. Marati, then Mr. Sampson.
Can you confirm what you were saying when you first started speaking, that, was it Ms. Moline that requested this change?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask another question?
Go ahead.
Thanks. You said that this policy was unanimously approved by the policy committee on February 23rd, but I noticed that the minutes are not available online for that meeting. Could we get a copy of those minutes prior to the second reading?
Yes.
Great. I have others, but I can go back to the queue if you prefer.
If we could allow Mr. Sampson and Mr. Doran to speak, since they have yet, I'll put you back in the queue after that.
Thank you.
Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. The purpose of the study of controversial issues is to help students learn how to gather, organize, and evaluate facts. I'm of the opinion that in order for students to learn how to gather, organize, and evaluate facts, the school district can keep their hands off of hot button, polarizing, controversial issues and stick to the subject that we already have a difficult time teaching, the ones that are at hand. I'm not saying it's an off-limits topic. I'm saying when you or the committee, which the board is hearing from, that is in full support of this, along with the administration, put in language such as shall and will teach controversial issues, that's a serious problem. We are diverting from the subject at hand, and we are going into an area, an arena, that the board is requiring the admin to require our staff to teach controversial issues. And it says will and shall. It's in there. That's clearly the intent. When you say we want to go out, we don't want to go out and teach controversial issues, I beg your pardon, it says in the proposed policy revision that it says will and shall. So that's exactly, in my opinion, what this policy does. Our teachers, I heard you say, Mr. Beam, our teachers have no other written guidance to go along with existing policy. The existing policy is only 2 sentences long. The Fairbanks North Suburban School District will provide a process, sounds good to me, for the objective study of controversial issues in order that students may have an opportunity to examine such issues in an instructional atmosphere free of partisanship and censorship. That sounds good enough to me. If what you're saying is the staff have no other written guidance, I suggest the administration come up with an AR to do as much. Seems pretty simple. When I hear you say that you are afraid of bringing forth an AR in fear of the board rejecting the policy change due to the board taking issue with the AR, that's a major problem with me. Because the AR, as was spoken to earlier by another member, is to reflect the spirit of the board in reference to our policy. And we want the administration to understand that clearly. If the administration deviates from the spirit, you've deviated from the spirit. And no, we should not support a policy that the administration wants to go in a different direction. It makes complete sense to have an AR here when the board requests it. The board requests ARs to go along with policy changes. I assume, at least I will speak for myself, when I'm kind of fearful that maybe y'all don't get it or maybe you're trying to go in a different direction. I think you kind of get the gist of my feelings for this. Lastly, I want to point out that I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I appreciate it. When you say teachers should be letting their parents know there is a big controversial issue. I agree with you. I also feel as if the board should be letting the parents and the community know when there's a controversial issue. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Doran.
Several points. This policy revision has been kicking around for a while, and it predates my time on the policy committee. And that being said, when I saw it was on the continuing agenda when I took over as chair, I looked at the original policy, and it was 1982, so it's 40 years ago. And I also looked at whether there were ARs or what the process was, and to the best of our knowledge, it was never done. And Mr. Beam and I have discussed this, and to the best of our knowledge, nothing was done beside it being passed in 1982. So what that process, what the idea was that at that time. What is, in terms of the policy committee discussion around this, at least in part, and I do want to note that the audio for the committee action is online. The minutes have not been approved, so they haven't been posted until after they're approved, but the audio is there. One of the things that I think is a clear reflection is the committee members really felt that there is a need to do an update from the original policy, and that has built over a period of years. There was some real discussion about wording, et cetera, and if you listen to the audio, you'll hear a number of suggestions. Well, should we word it this way or that way or the other thing? The end result was they said, well, there could maybe be some adjustment in wording, but it's the concepts, and they felt that it was worthwhile moving it forward and getting it on the table. The thing that crosses my mind often in terms of controversial issues is really the question, what is a controversial issue? In our curriculum, we promote looking at different perspectives on things, whether it's a book you're reading, whether it's reading a newspaper article, and whether it's opinion or fact, or we do that throughout our curriculum and throughout the grades. What becomes a topic that's all been vetted, so if it's part of our curriculum, does that make it controversial that we need to then highlight it in another way? And I would say if that's been dealt with in our curriculum adoption, and we have a long process involving parents, community members, students, teachers, et cetera, in an opportunity to be part of that. So it was within the curriculum, that's one thing. A lot of times it's issues that come up, and I think that's where helping teachers that whom I think do a tremendously good job in trying to keep their biases or specific perspective in check, but to respond when students raise an issue. And that's more often what it is. You know, it's not what's the controversy of the day. It's really, what do students see? How do they see it? Maybe, you know, I've been in classrooms, I've been a teacher, and I've known teachers who have dealt with questions from students or perspective that said, okay, well, this is what I believe, or I was taught this, and it's been respected, and they've shared the different viewpoints, and making sure that students listen to each other. And I think that's the key thing. Is it controversial? Well, may or may not be. And, you know, it's a different viewpoint from a student. And it's that reminder that as the teacher in front of the classroom, it's not what I think. It's recognizing and saying, how do we have this conversation? And what I have been impressed with particularly over the last few years, is parent and child, student, coming, testifying to the board. And parent sometimes agreeing with what their child is saying, sometimes not agreeing, but respecting that they have two different viewpoints. And I attribute that to a lot of the benefit of how teachers have handled conversations, have promoted students to think and express themselves, and that we've actually, I believe, seen an increase in numbers of students who have written to us or have testified, that in actuality on some of these issues, controversial or not, they have been able to put their thoughts together. And they've obviously had conversations with their parents. You know, I kind of hear what people are saying, and you know, whether this is ready or not ready, it's there is some feeling that we need to definitely address this. You know, we're hearing that from teachers, and that's one of the things I heard through policy committee, and feel very fortunate to have been part of that conversation, which has not just teachers, it has support staff, it has community members offering their perspective, and that it is not just the topic of the day, but providing, okay, when situations are there that teachers do have that support, they have some of that guidance, they're reminded, as we are as professionals, that it's not how I think It's how we express and share ideas and help students to formulate their ideas with it. Also recognizing, as this does, that we do have a curriculum, and we're talking what's in the curriculum, not something that's just brought in off the street. It needs to be within the context of the curriculum. So I just offer those thoughts at this time.
Ms. Sanderson, then Ms. Marotti, then Ms. Smith.
Mr. Bean, thank you for bringing this before the board, and definitely can see that we need to have some additional information, additional guidelines. And in the society and the world we live in, complex issues, diverse perspectives, they're right there in the forefront. And the policy has to come into effect because students at any given time will bring up the topic and just yell it out and disrupt the classroom. And, you know, every instructor knows the atmosphere of their class. They know their student body. Our students are facing diverse worlds, diverse perspectives. And, you know, we have to have the guidelines so that educators are protected. They have some kind of, they know exactly, you know, I'm going to present this material. I'm not going to be, you know, have an opinion on the material. I'm going to guide the discussion so the students can, you know, not yell at each other, but hopefully our instructors in our district can provide that atmosphere that's not being provided in our world today. Because I have one perspective as a woman of faith. If I state that, then I can be canceled, or I could be really ridiculed and some horrible language coming my way that I wouldn't want to hear or I have to deal with. So we need the policy, we need the AR to put in perspective for just what you said, the protection of student staff. And as a parent who's raised 3 students through this system, every time something came up that was something that our family or our values didn't line up with, we just dealt with that. And I want to just always keep that perspective before our community, that that's something this district is not trying to take away at any cost, but you need the guidance for our teaching staff and our support staff, and so students can know how they can conduct themselves. We all can have a conversation. We're all not going to get along, but we're going to be able to be taught how to grab hold to a controversial issue. We're going to know how to research. We're going to know how to dialogue with it. We're going to know how to put our perspective and our beliefs out there in a respectful manner that we can move along. So I'm looking forward to maybe some additional language to support this, to put a more firmer foundation underneath it so that the guidelines can go through and students can have what they need, and so can our staff. Thank you.
Ms. Marotti, then Mrs. Smith, then Mr. Rhodes.
My first is a statement, and I think it's been said, but just to clarify or confirm, the both sides issue. You said that the resolution is to go back to curriculum. I would request that that be in policy. So if that hasn't been stated or it needs more support, I think that that needs to be in the policy, that the resolution, whether it's controversial or not, needs to go back to curriculum somehow. So on one of your slides, not that one, but maybe another one, it talks about the purpose of this, or the intent of the policy is to create a safe space so that students can make an argument, share ideas, listen, etc. How was the original policy not providing this, and how are the changes going to provide this?
I would not, well, I think that the original policy is so short and nothing to it that it didn't do anything. It really, all it did was said, here's what a controversial issue is, right? And it gave a definition. That's all it did. Did it not provide a safe space? Did it provide a safe space? It didn't do either. And I'm sorry, I missed I forget the second part of that question.
Sorry, how are the changes to this policy going to provide that space, safe space?
By giving the teachers the guidelines, and those guidelines would protect both the teachers and the students at the same time. Because now what the guidelines would give, as was said, those bumpers to the teachers to say, we need to stay within here. Let's not go outside of it. And that gives the students a safe space. It also gives them a safe space to learn how to deal with multiple perspectives of things. As I said earlier, that's kind of the main purpose of this entire thing, is so kids can learn how to learn how to view multiple perspectives, learn how to debate multiple perspectives, learn how to give their thoughts on something in a rational and reasonable way. That's kind of really most of the time the main purpose of studying, quote, controversial issues. It's not because we want kids to think one way or the other. Matter of fact, that's not what we want. And we don't want the teachers to lean one way or the other on these certain things. It's about giving the kids to space, that safe space to have different opinions. Again, as long as we're not the whole both sides kind of thing. And part of the guidance that we're coming up with helps kind of define or give some suggestions on what a teachers could do when things like that come up.
I think I have one more question.
Go ahead if you have one more question.
Maybe an easy one, maybe not. Define controversial in relation to this policy. What is the definition of controversial in relation to this policy?
The policy itself would say it exists for the purposes of this policy when any topic evokes diverse public viewpoints on multiple facets of an issue. That's how it's phrased in the policy.
Okay.
And many of the various school districts have like a definition of what a controversial issue is, and they're all kind of the same like this.
Mrs. Smith, Mr. Rhodes, and I put myself in the queue.
Thank you. I wanted to address that I do want this issue addressed, and I want it addressed in policy. That what was lacking in this policy is maybe that it had no AR for the last 40 years. I mean, I called Ms. Tuttle today to say, like, really? These two sentences have just been hanging there for 40 years, and there's nothing about what that means. So that was just shocking and needs remedy.
I'm so happy to be the one to bring all this to you.
Yes, I love it. You know, I love it, Mr. B. So sort of what Ms. Sanderson was saying about the controversial issues in Mr. Doran, where students can think something totally different than their family, they can find a place to discover those ideas or bring them forward, but that it should be things that are within our curriculum. And I just can't express enough how important this is to me, and really hinges on, am I keeping my kids in this school district for the future? And I think a lot of other families feel that way too. Are we a place that purposefully shall bring up controversial issues in order to teach children to deviate from the beliefs of their parents? Okay. I'm not trying to embarrass my daughter, but I will because Mr. Doran brought it up, which is my family had certain beliefs about the mask policy, about masks, and about COVID. Then my daughter came and testified against my beliefs to the school board, which is fine because we foster that in our family. And that's good, and I'm proud of her. However, masks were talked about constantly at school. That was nowhere in our curriculum. Teachers were all over the place putting up signs in their classroom that said, masks are the greatest thing that ever happened to you to protect you from COVID. That seems controversial. You know, we have still to this day complaining constantly. People look at this sign that's on the nurse's office. Look at this that's here. Look at this that's there. So none of these things are in the curriculum, but teachers are still putting that the best way to protect yourself against COVID is get a vaccine. Who's to say that? Seems controversial, not in our policy. I want a policy to fix that for me. That's my main goal right there. I don't want anyone telling my kids the best way to live is XYZ, coming straight from me and hanging a sign on it in their classroom, because that's none of their business. And I would just like this policy to stop that from happening. And to me, this does nothing to stop that from happening. So in saying all of that, I'd like to make a motion. At a minimum, to add in this policy, I'll just go slow because that might be a surprise. After, in the third paragraph, after the last sentence, I hope this makes sense there. The teacher may not express a personal opinion even if he or she identifies it as such.
Can you please restate that?
Sure. The teacher may not express a personal opinion even if he or she identifies it as such.
Second.
Would you like to speak on that?
Sure. I'm still, even with that in there, I'm not like really happy with this policy, and I still want to see the AR, and everything I said before still stands. But there's no way I can vote yes to this policy, most likely in any form, unless it states that teacher may not express their personal opinion, even if he or she defines it as such, because a teacher has such a strong position of authority over their students that it has a lot of power to take away the rights that only a parent or guardian has to discuss many subjects with a student in an authoritative way. And that I feel that it's really important for us to let our staff know that if they want to facilitate conversations with among the students or in their classroom, they should not be taking a side, which provides authority to that side and provides a right, because when you want to know what's right or wrong in this class, you ask the teacher. So if the teacher is telling you, this is right, it's my own personal opinion, it still carries a lot of authority. And I would like to see that not involved in controversial topics.
Just for clarity's sake, you're looking at the end of the third paragraph, is that what you said?
I think so. Yep, because it just says the schools will teach, which I think should be shall, but maybe a different time to address that. Teach about all of these customs, particular religion, sect, or, you know, that they're not going to favor the beliefs of customs of any particular religion, sect, political or economic or social viewpoint. And the teacher may not put their viewpoint forward unless, even if they say it's their viewpoint.
So if I could just get a point of clarity for what the board is asking. So right now, we don't have a policy to build an AR for. So that is going to be problematic for building an AR for a policy we don't have for. So if you're looking for ARs for the previous policy, 1982 policy, that's a policy that we have. To build the ARs, I guess I need a little more clarity on that.
It's a point of order. It's not germane to the motion at hand.
Okay.
I apologize. I'll hold my question for later.
Yeah, hold the question until after the vote. Ms. Moretti?
So this is just a first reading, and we don't typically vote on amendments on the first reading. So I'm just wondering if this is even following our normal protocol?
Ms. Tuttle?
The board can make amendments during first reading. They haven't done a lot of that in the past. You're absolutely right. And the recent past, prior boards have, absolutely. So it's up to the board, but you are correct that you can make one, or you can make a suggestion if the whole board's in agreement. But on something like this, it's probably better to do it through a vote.
May I follow up?
Yes.
In that case, then I need to go back to everything I said and make amendments to the things that I'm requesting to be changed to the motion, unless Mr. Beam has been taking great notes and will then provide that feedback in reading number 2. And I'll need to know that whether or not I need to make an amendment or not.
I would say I've taken notes. I can't say who said what. And the only thing that I've typed in there for sure is the sentence that we just have, and I know where to put that. I've heard about the will and the shall. I would like to point out the only shall is in there. It says that the administration shall support teachers. I don't see another shall in there.
Point of order.
Unless I'm just missing it.
The motion on the floor.
Yeah. Can we get back to that one, Ms. Marati? Mr. Rhodes, I know your name was on there. Is it pertinent to the amendment?
The opinion, yeah, I could.
The amendment, is it pertinent to the amendment or just that? Okay, go ahead.
So I'm gonna have to come out and disagree here with Mrs. Smith. Personally, because I value and respect my teachers' opinions, and sometimes I even actively seek out conversations with them, honestly, because, well, A, the school district hired them, so they're trustworthy adults on some epic level, right? And B, the school district should support them in that. And so making it so it's impossible for a teacher to share an opinion without repercussions sounds like a pretty bad idea. And so if we are going to allow them because a student seeks it out, what would be the credence for that, and so on and so forth? Because I feel like saying thou shalt not have an opinion isn't the greatest idea, but that's just a student speaking.
I had Mr. Doran's hand up first and then Ms. Smith.
And speaking directly to the amendment, actually, similar phrasing had come up in the committee discussions, and actually looking at the professional teaching practices guidance, that whether something clearer should be stated in terms of that. I do really appreciate Mr. Rhodes's perspective as a student, because I do know as a teacher, I had in social studies, I had students who wanted to know how I came to, let's say, my perspective or such, which in a certain sense is also a modeling of what we are asking the students to do to back up their, whether opinion or perspective or whatever. And so it can be a tricky thing. And one of my concerns with this whole thing is that we don't put teachers or students in a gotcha situation. It does make me mindful with this amendment, though, is that several people have raised wording whether we're there yet or not. And so I'm not against the amendment as such, where it's intended to go, because that is guidance, I believe, even in PTPC, though I don't have their exact wording, but, but it is there as our code of ethics as professionals, that we don't make our personal opinion, we're not proselytizing or propagandizing as such. How that plays out, and I think that's the art of being a good educator, is those conversations. It's very much like the art of being a parent and navigating some of those discussions with our kids or other people in our household and best friends and whatever it may be. That I am so I have some mixed feelings about the amendment. The idea I wanted to bring forth is something that actually was discussed. We did not resolve it in the committee, but it was discussed in the committee as to how to phrase that and to what extent. We did not get to that in terms of an actual change. But again, more my thoughts on that, and I'm still processing how I would go to it. I'm not sure we're ready for, that we have much more to do on this, and whether this policy is really ready to go forward would be in relation to the amendment, reflects that.
Ms. Smith?
Well, I just get so distracted by and other thoughts. I guess I would want to, since it's my amendment, just address that I would think that you wouldn't be explaining to children in the classroom how you came to your opinion because the policy says that you shouldn't be giving your opinion. So you would want to teach the children how they should form their opinions as the policy states, how to do the research, how to find facts to support your argument. However, you shouldn't have to say, how did you come to that conclusion, Mr. Teacher? Because Mr. Teacher shouldn't be proselytizing his opinion. And as Mr. Rhodes said, regarding going to teachers for their opinion, this policy is not addressing all opinions of all teachers and saying that teachers can't have an opinion on what kind of jelly beans they like or whether football is cool. This is talking about controversial issues. That's it. Controversial issues, and that I 100% believe no teachers should be talking about controversial issues to students from a position of authority, giving their opinion. It's basically teaching children to take the teacher's point of view. And I would not appreciate that for any of my students. And if I just would have to consider my decision to trust the school with my children if we were not willing to make a policy that said that teachers cannot basically indoctrinate my students with their own personal points of view on controversial issues.
Ms. Marotti, Mr. Sampson, then Mr. Rhodes.
So in regards to the amendment, I'm finding it redundant due to the second sentence already proposed in the policy. It's stating the same thing. So I think the amendment is not needed, and I won't be supporting it. And also, per the definition of controversial issues in here, being that it's any topic that evokes diverse public viewpoint, that does limit almost everything that a teacher could talk about if it's diverse from another viewpoint. So I think this is very limiting in that, if that is the true definition of controversial.
Mr. Sampson.
I'd like to call I'd like to call the question.
Did Ms. Sampson just, sorry, Sanderson. So we've been called to questions, so that means we will need to go to a vote, but we should wait until Ms. Sanderson comes back. All right, Ms. Tuttle, if you could call the vote on the amendment.
Colonel Williamson,
No.
thank you. Colonel Surrey,
No.
thank you. Mr. Rhodes,
No.
thank you. Mrs. Sanderson,
No.
thank you. Miss Marati,
No.
thank you. Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Sampson,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Doran,
No.
thank you. Mrs. Luke,
No.
amendment failed.
All right, I was actually next on the list. And I'll speak to even my vote. I think right now is the time to give administration back the information that we're giving them so that they can wordsmith according to what the board is discussing, and not put it into finality with the wording tonight. Mr. Beam, thank you. I know that you have been put into a really hard spot starting your position with us this year. And I just want to say thank you. I know that you have been putting in a lot of hard work and effort, and the learning curve has been incredibly swift and a tall order. But I just want to say thank you for stepping up and doing the work that you're doing. And I know it's not an easy task to bring these things before the board. It's been quite the heavy lift. So I want to say thank you to you and your team for that. And I think just ending and my last comment about this, or my only comment, will be that I think one of the greatest things that our board has been kind of discussing a lot is the fact that there is no AR for this, where all the other policies that have been brought before us, there have been ARs for us to understand the intent of how it is to be regulated or utilized within the district. And I completely understand not putting the cart before the horse in that regard. However, I truly believe for the board to really fully understand the intent and how this policy will be utilized and given throughout or utilized within the district, we definitely need to have an AR. Also, it seems as though there's a lot of just wordsmithing, understanding more depth within this policy. For that reason, I will be voting no on this policy tonight. And the reason being is that I think the board needs more time to understand and maybe work with administration on how this policy can come to fruition and be a part of our past policies. And so that's just kind of my stance with this, is that request that there is a possible AR that could be utilized to help the board understand. And my request is to allow board members that have made suggestions to email you along with Ms. Moline and Ms. Tuttle the recommendations that they're making, so we can see how those fit together within the policy itself. I feel like tonight we could go round and round and round as we have, and we can continue this for a very long time. But it seems as though the board is just not fully, for lack of a better term, on board with this policy yet, that there needs to be some fine tuning. And so my request to administration is that we can get a possible AR outline to us, and that we as board members can email our suggestions or thoughts to you along with Ms. Moline and Ms. Tuttle, with those suggestions that have been made tonight, or the suggestions that we would like to see on this policy.
So one more time, just for clarification, you're requesting ARs on a policy that's still in the amendment process?
Yes. And the reason why we need to see what the administration's, oh gosh, I'm having a hard time articulating my thought at this point in time, but your intent behind the policy. Because with all of the other policies that we work through, there's already an AR that we can see what the intent and how the district will move forward with that particular policy, whether it's negotiations or within our board members, or whether it's discipline. We know the outline, the intent, the steps that the district would take to actually put that policy in place. And so with how it's written and the intent, you'd mentioned that there were a number of things already written. I think that the board needs to have just a better understanding of that.
So you're wanting the guidance that we've already put so far, because to do an AR before a policy is actually in place, especially when the policy is under amendment process. The point of the AR is to implement the policy. So I'm still struggling a little bit with how that would happen. We could bring, we could write ARs for the old policy that's in place and has been voted on. We could write ARs for that, because obviously none have been written for these decades. But to implement a policy that hasn't been fully voted on, I'm still just trying to get my head around that.
I'm going to kind of go down the list, because it seems as though some people have their hands raised, and let me think about how I would explain it maybe in a different way. I had Ms. Marotti, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sampson, and Mr. Doran.
Thank you. First, I want to preface with, I appreciate you, Mr. Beam, for the obvious hard work that you've put into this and your team. And I want to thank Mr. Doran and the policy committee for the work that they've done on this. However, I won't be approving this at this time, because I need the following from admin to include the AR. And we're not asking, to be clear, we're not asking for you to implement the AR. We're asking for a draft of what that might look like. You stated that you don't have one, but Mr. Beam stated that the already has, it's going to be 10 to 12 bullet points. So we're somewhere. We just want a draft of what it will look like in order to approve this. And if anybody's keeping a list, I need the meeting minutes from the February 23rd Policy Committee meeting. And then my request is to add the curriculum to resolve both sides' concerns that we heard. I do suggest adding at the end of the third paragraph, when a topic is in question, the board approved curriculum will provide the educational perspective.
A couple of questions. So, as was asked, if you guys could email those to me, I can put them where we need to be. A point of process, what Mr. Doran said earlier, is that the minutes that you're asking for have not been approved yet. So, and this is a question, not a statement. They haven't been approved yet. So then they're not available to look at, but they're not going to be approved because we don't have another policy committee meeting this year.
But the audio is available. Mr. Doran said that the audio is available.
Okay, that'll work. Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I was just thinking that maybe it's, I understand the complication of the AR, right? And I mean, you could say it's a draft AR. But when I saw the attachment of like presentation from teaching and learning, I thought there was going to be more in there that was going to basically outline how teaching and learning had in their mind to implement this policy. So it doesn't have to be an AR, it could be a slideshow about how we see implementing this policy as it's written, in suggested amendments. It doesn't have to necessarily be an AR, but to get a yes vote, I have to understand what I'm saying yes to. And I don't. I don't understand what I'm saying yes to. So had the administration come and said, this is how we came to this decision about, you know, why we put these words, what our goals were, and then said, in the implementation, if this policy were implemented, here are the kinds of things that you would see in the classroom. Here's the kind of procedure. For example, someone wants to present on XYZ. Our thought is they would go through this type of process. It's not written in stone. It's just we want to see the idea or the thought of what's, not that we're approving that or disapproving that. It just, I need to know if there is a, who gets to decide if it's controversial, like Ms. Marati is saying, seems like anything could be controversial. Who gets to draw the line of which side is we put our foot down on this side. We're not going to discuss this because it's in our curriculum. So putting it that it's the curriculum. Just like little things like saying this is how we're going to implement this. This is how teaching and learning is going to implement this policy. How it would change our classrooms. How it would change our procedures. It doesn't have to be an AR today, but just saying this is how it would affect our classrooms. This is how it would affect our our current process or something like that would be get things going.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you for articulating my thoughts. Mr. Sampson and then Mr. Doran.
Thank you, Madam President. I guess I definitely wouldn't support this policy as it's written. I've heard today Mr. Beam say that there's no safe space written provided in the old policy. And when I read the old policy, it says an atmosphere free of partisanship and censorship. So I guess the administration's understanding of a safe space in mind is completely different, because when I read it's a atmosphere free of partisanship and censorship. That's pretty much as safe as it should get. That's the latitude that our educators need, in my opinion, to ensure that it's cordial discourse. I would say that when the administration comes before the board and says that it's a failed policy, there's lack of direction, I would say maybe y'all should have come up with an AR before you come to us telling us something's not working. I would tell you it's not working because the administration failed to produce an AR for the last 40 years. And when you come to the board or to me and you tell me that you want me to accept something that states the district will provide guidance, but you can't make clear and articulate in a clear manner to me what that guidance means. And furthermore, there's language that states the superintendent administration shall support teachers in developing an awareness. What does that mean, support teachers developing an awareness? It's not that difficult. I don't fail to understand why there's an aversion to bringing forth an AR as it relates to a policy that's being supported and basically proposed by the administration. This is not a question. I understand that we don't want to get the cart in front of the horse. We don't want to create extra work. But you can't come to us with a bunch of extra language that gives you all these different avenues to go down, and you can't even articulate what you mean by it. There's a whole presentation. There's bullet points, a dozen bullet points that were referred to, and they were not bothered to be presented here. I want an AR with it before I support it. And yes, you're right. It might end up being a waste of time because we won't like the AR. It wouldn't be a waste of time because if we don't like the AR, we're telling you, change the AR because it's not in spirit with the policy. It's not difficult. Bring forth an AR in the future. And for a point of order, there's no question here.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. Listening to the conversation tonight, it appears to me we're not ready to actually move this to second reading. That there's, it does seem that some action at some point needs to be taken. And it's been referenced whether, having the policy, we have a policy that's basically served us for 40 years. It has never had an AR and outlined the process. Over that 40 years, it's come that it's time to do some updating. And we've often had suggested policy and draft ARs come together. And I'm thinking particularly of some of the discipline policies we dealt with in recent years and some of the Title IX related ones. There are times when we've really brought both together in this to help fill out that full picture. So I think it is appropriate for us to do that. It is true that we have had policies sometimes that there is no, it's pretty straightforward. It's an updating piece or such, and they may not need to go hand in hand. But I think it's appropriate in this one. And so I will vote no on moving it to second reading, but with my full intent behind that is that I'm not rejecting this, that it does go back to administration and to come with that fuller picture for us. I think, yes, it's important enough if you want controversial topic to go forward, but, but at this time, it's not ready to move to second reading. Sometimes we've had policies presented to us, and we have had some amendments, we've had some suggestions to come back within, the 2 weeks for a second reading, but it was pretty clear where we were there. Here, I'm not feeling that we have much clarity yet on this point. I did have one question to Ms. Smoline, just in terms of internal process for this policy and others. Could you just explain the process? And I'll be upfront. And one of the things I'm thinking of, when I was on management team, a lot of times these policies came through management team also for those perspectives before or after it went to one of the committees, because we're advisory as a committee. But could you just explain the process for this one? I know some of it predates your time in your position. So to the extent that you can, what has been the process on this?
What has been the process in bringing this particular policy to the board? Is that the question?
Right.
Or-
What's the process for looking at policies internally through administration before it comes to the board?
So this particular process has been in the works, as you mentioned, for some time. So the need for a revision of policy comes forward. The policy committee looks at it, works with the department, the person leading the work. Previous to Mr. Beam being in this position, Ms. McDaniel worked with the policy committee in hammering out what the policy should have in it. So that's the first step, is putting something together. Then it goes through the policy committee. And as you know, this particular policy has gone through several meetings, several conversations, several edits. And then once it has come through the policy committee and the policy committee has come up with their, what they believe is ready, then it comes to the board. Once the board goes through their process and the policy is approved, in all of my experience in policy writing and implementation, the process would be that it goes through the board approves the policy, and the implementing body, whether it's the state or the district, writes administrative regulations for implementation. So the policy is set by the board, which is the responsibility then, board responsibility, and the areas are written by the district to implement the policy. So that's kind of in a nutshell how historically I cannot really speak to. Obviously, not all policies had ARs written for them, but historically and from all of my experience, that would be the process.
I do a follow-up.
Before you follow up, can I get a motion to extend?
Move to extend to 9:45.
Second.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we are extended to 9:45.
Can I do the follow-up then?
There wasn't opposed.
Oh, there was an oppose?
I oppose.
Ms. Tuttle, can we have a vote?
Mr. Rhodes?
This is to extend the meeting to 9:45, correct?
Correct.
No.
Thank you. Colonel Williamson?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Surrey?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we do have another topic. We have a report after this on the school calendar. So Mr. Doran.
Okay. So my follow-up is first, does management team leadership look at the policy? Is that part of the process?
Yes.
Okay, so it has gone through them. Okay. Okay, I lost my other thought, sorry.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Oh. Ms. Marati?
Through the chair, I think this is a question for our parliamentarian. Is voting to vote it down the correct step, or is tabling it or postponing? I think that's another option for a specific amount of time, an option that might be more suitable.
That would be the board's decision, and it's been done all those ways through different boards. Some boards have voted to approve first reading, moving to second reading, asking for all these changes and noting don't bring it back for second reading until the changes have been made. Some boards have voted it down during first reading and just asked the administration to bring it back when it's ready.
Can you remind me what the process to table looks like?
If you table it, it's really put on the table for tonight to bring up later tonight. You would probably want to postpone rather than table.
And can you postpone not exactly to a specific date, but till the things that have been brought up have been addressed?
You could say you postpone to you move to postpone second reading until a time when all of the board's requests have been fulfilled.
Okay. So I'm going to move to postpone second reading until all requests have been completed and fulfilled.
I'm sorry, Ms. Marati, if it passed first reading, it would be moved to approve first reading and postpone second reading. You really can't postpone second reading because you haven't approved first reading. So you could move to postpone first reading. I'm
Okay,
sorry, I misunderstood you.
Okay, that's exactly what I wanted. So move to postpone first reading until all issues that the board has stated have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Addressed. Until all issues the board has stated have been addressed. I think that is all. If anyone wants to amend, feel free.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think it's obvious. I don't think this is ready to be moved to second reading, but I also don't think that it needs to be voted down because it's still a policy in the works. So my suggestion, my motion is to postpone the vote for first reading until it is properly addressed.
Mr. Doran, then Mr. Sampson.
I appreciate the intent of the motion, but because I don't think we have all that much clarity on exactly what all things that the board is interested in is there. So I'm not in favor of postponing. I am in favor of voting it down at this time to move.
Mr. Sampson.
I'd like to call a question.
Ms. Tuttle.
Colonel Surrey?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Williamson?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Yes.
Motion failed.
So we are back to the original motion. And I have Ms. Smith and Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak to why I don't think that we should vote down this policy and why I know it's irrelevant, but I did support the amendment. I don't think we should vote down this policy because will it just come back? Because I want to address this policy. I guess I need clarification on what voting no does. Because we want to advance it to a second reading. Okay, but what I would have liked to have seen happen was some changes and still have 3 readings, because we would hopefully be facing a somewhat dramatically different reading if we had a new first reading.
And if I understood Mrs. Tuttle correctly, is that if we vote it down and ask the administration, the first reading, vote it down, ask administration to make the changes with the emails that we give them, then that they would bring it back as another first reading? Is that correct, Ms. Tuttle?
Right, because first reading would not have passed here. You could also move to amend the main motion of the first reading to come back as an additional first reading with the proposed changes.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Luke. Then I'm fine with voting down the policy.
Okay. Mr. Sampson?
I'd like to call the question.
Ms. Tuttle?
Colonel Surrey?
I guess I don't understand. What am I voting on now?
You're voting on the main motion. Move to approve first reading, public hearing,
Okay.
and submit to second reading of policy 991, controversial issues.
Okay, so no.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes?
No.
Thank you. Colonel Williamson?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
No.
Thank you. Motion failed.
Thank you. And this is with the intent that we can email and continue the conversation and have another first reading in the future. Thank you so much, Mr. Beam.
Thank you.
Next, we have information and reports. Proposed 2023-2024 academic school calendar report. Core values center everything we do on the student and student learning. The administration will provide an overview of the 2 proposed 2023-2024 academic school calendar drafts, along with the summary of the public input and calendar guidelines. The 2023-2024 calendar is scheduled to come before the board for adoption on the May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting. Mrs. Moline.
Yes, Ms. Herbie will give a brief overview of the differences in the calendars and the outcome of the survey.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'll just really briefly go over what was in the packet. And essentially, we just had 2 options this year that parents and the community. Can you hear me okay? Nope. It sounds really loud when you're sitting right there. Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. So we basically had 2 options that were in your packet and that the community and parents gave feedback on and staff gave feedback on. Just in general, when we're making calendars for our academic calendar for the school district, so we need 180 student contact days plus 4 teacher work days. And then there's rules about what counts as a student contact day. Quarters should be approximately 45 days each. Semesters should be approximately 90 days. We need 3 tentative student contact days at the end for inclement weather. And then there's some rules about where the teacher work days need to be. And all of this was in the guidelines for the 23-24 calendar that was in the packet. And then we have, the observed holidays according to Alaska statute and our own policy. So we can't just make whatever calendar we want to have. We have to follow some rules to put these together. So there were two options, option 1 and option 2. They were very similar. We didn't have, there wasn't a big push for any significant changes in 23-24. So there's not a huge variation between these two calendars. The main differences are in option 1, which is the little blue one. The first day of school was Wednesday, August 16th. The first semester will end on a Wednesday. So winter break would start Thursday, December 21st. The first day of the second semester would be Thursday, January 4th, so a little earlier. And the last day of school is a Wednesday on May 15th. In option 2, which was the green one, the first day of school is the Thursday. The first semester then ends on a Friday, and so winter break would start Christmas Day, which is the 21st, the 25th. And the first day of second semester is a Tuesday on January 9th, so a little bit later. And the last day of school is a Friday on May 17th. So beyond that, they were similar. With parent-teacher conferences were the same, spring break was the same. Spring break in both these calendars aligns with UAF, which was an often requested feature that we have on both these calendars. And then student testing is the month of April. So just sort of, that was the overview for the calendars. The survey results, so we got just a little bit over 2,700 responses. About 80% were parents, and you could select, the respondents could select, parent, staff, whichever applied to them. They select more than one. We had elementary parents were a big population that responded. And as you can see from the survey results, it was very tight. Option 2 just inched ahead at 51.5, whereas option 1 had 48.5. Obviously very close. I thought it might be helpful to kind of do more of a breakdown looking at the different respondents, and so that's what's included on the last page of the survey results. In general, or parents pretty much completely, it was option 2. Didn't all parents, elementary, middle school, high school, was all option 2. Staff in general, overall, it was option 2, but there was a split. FEA and FPA preferred option 1, where SN not represented preferred option 2. And then we did have some community and student responses, but they were a very small number, so they shouldn't really be considered representative of our community or the student body. But I didn't want to leave them out, so I included them in here. And so that was obviously very quick, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mr. Doran.
Just to clarify, and I think I caught you right, that the spring break on both of these matches UAF's spring break.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey, can you speak to your opinion of the discrepancy between the responses in regards to the preferred calendar, specifically with ESSA and also with non-represented?
And by discrepancy, are you referring to that they differ from FEA and FPA, or what do you mean by discrepancy? I can't speak to why the two groups are different. We didn't receive much feedback that was sent in. I don't believe any from FEA or FPA.
So this calendar is student contact days. So this and professional development. So this is for what the parents would have when school is in session. So as far as like a 10-month count for 10-month employees versus 12-month employees versus ESSA, that's not this calendar.
A follow-up?
Go ahead.
I'm speaking in reference to, when you look at all staff in general, it's pretty much evenly split, 48.7 to 51.2. It's about, we'll call that 50-50.
Oh, I see.
When you look at FEA, I see Ms. Ryan is here, 52 to 47. I'll call that about 50-50. That's pretty close. But then we get to ESSA, 44 to 56. There's quite a spread there. And also quite the spread when you look at FPA, A. And I just wondered if there was, if there's anything to read into that, or that's just kind of how it played out, or I was looking for clarity on that, if there was any.
First, I want to apologize for not answering your question. Now I understand your question. It would be really difficult, I think, to assign any kind of conclusion to a survey it isn't any deeper than this one went. This was a pretty straightforward survey and didn't get into much past the which one do you like. If we were wanting to draw conclusions, I would want to have a lot more data and a lot more questions. So.
Thank you.
Ms. Marati and then Mr. Rhodes.
Just a quick question. Doesn't this typically go through the parent engagement committee?
In previous years, it has. The difference with this year, so normally this would be brought forward to you by the PR director, and that position is who puts this calendar together, who makes this presentation. That position has been empty, or was empty, for about 4 or 5 months, when a lot of this would have been happening and going forward to the parent engagement committee is one committee that it usually goes in front of. And so it's essentially just something where we got to where we need to get this in front of the board. It needs to be voted on, and so there wasn't time to get it to parent engagement committee.
It's incredibly disappointing that someone dropped the ball and it wasn't caught, and the parent engagement committee got left out of the process. I hope that there will be an apology to that committee.
Mr. Rhodes?
I was wondering, Wednesday, August 16th, school starts for the first option, and then it ends the 15th, right? And then for option 2, it starts the 17th and ends the 17th. So I was wondering if you could explain how we start a day earlier on option 1 and end 2 days sooner, whereas in option 2, we start on the 17th and end on the 17th. Does that question make sense?
Yes, so I would need to, let me look at this a little bit closer. So I think you'll find your answer if you look at the end of each quarter, there's how many days each quarter is. So in the option, I'm looking at the wrong, hang on. In option 2, it looks like we've got we have a longer second quarter than option 1. And we have a little bit longer fourth quarter, and so I think that's where those extra days are coming from. And they're not extra days. I mean, they're both 180. It's just how it probably worked out with the other PD days and weekends and stuff, holidays.
Mr. Sampson?
Thank you, Madam President. The Parent Engagement Committee brings to mind, I'm not sure how many people are on that. I think it's a pretty important piece. And maybe I'm missing the number. Can you tell me how many parents were actually surveyed in this?
Yes.
Was it just like a couple dozen there, like on the?
2,205 parents.
Can you say that again?
2,205 parents answered the survey.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Doran?
Question for the conversation in February with the Professional Development Day, and then followed by 2 parent-teacher conference days. I think we heard some mixed, so you may have better information on it, but in terms of 3 days without students in school, making a particularly long weekend, and then only 2 days students back in. I think there was some concerns about melding that, and maybe you could just give us some information on that. And I do recognize, as I asked that question, is that sometimes it's better to have 1 week disrupted rather than multiple weeks. But I know we have not always had 3 days together like that. So.
And I can only speak to that a small amount. I do just remember when this was started a couple of years ago, and it was, I believe, so there would be fewer disruptions over fewer weeks. So you have 1 week where there's a longer break. I would have to refer to Ms. Moline and potentially some of our instructional people for how that plays out in the schools.
So I can't speak to conversations that happened in previous years, but to Mr. Dorn's point, Yes, to be, to have a larger chunk of time off and not disruptive over many weeks. So in other words, take care of what needs to be taken care of and then spend time focused on instruction.
And question whether, instead of being the beginning of the week, being at the end of the week, is there anything, again, I'm going more by hearsay, takes, there's a lot of energy, and I know from experience, there's a lot of energy that goes into parent-teacher conferences, preparing for them, working with parents, students through those days, and then going back into, and then teaching for 2 days, right, versus the, instead of the reverse. Any thoughts on that?
Again, I don't know the conversation previous, but I know this year we didn't get a lot of feedback on that.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the board? Further comments from administration?
Nope.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the work that your department did.
Thank you.
All right, it looks as though we do have a little bit of time for some board comments, since we are extended till 9:45. If you do have a board comment, when I come to you, if we could be concise and make sure that we end on time. Colonel Surrey, I'll start with you.
No further comments tonight. Thanks, President.
Thank you. Colonel Williamson?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Thank you. A couple of kudos. Want to say thank you to the number of people in our community who are advocating on our behalf for education. A number of them testified at the assembly meeting last week. And then people have been talking to legislators and really promoting an investment in public education. So I really want to thank them for stepping forward and speaking on our behalf. Also recognizing, as I've visited some schools and seen the preparations that individual schools are making to welcome new students who will be transferring from the closing schools and joining new school communities. But those efforts by principals and staff and parent-teacher organizations to really make the new students and their families welcome in the individual schools. And I also had a chance last week to attend one of the cluster signings that Hutchinson High School is doing, working with each of their cluster groups, their concentration groups, to make kind of a recommitment, especially since over the last couple of years, where we've had some remote learning and hybrid learning and things of that sort. But they had a signing ceremony, and they're doing it with each of their clusters. That the students, I was there for automotive and small engines. They came, they're signing a contract in lots of ways. It's very much like they will do for signings for apprenticeship programs and things of that sort. But it was truly impressive. Teachers in those trades spoke to the students, reiterated their expectations and hopes for them. They had community members, employers, who shared some thoughts as the people who are going to be hiring these graduates. And they had graduates who are out in the field. And I was quite impressed with one of the graduates. As she said, she's 22. She drives an ore truck at Kinross Mine, a big grader, but she is training others. And she gave she could talk the students' language. and said, this is what you could be doing. And as she noted that she makes a very, very good salary. So, you know, I think they're doing that to bring their communities together and provide that for students. They do have, I believe, their last cluster group will be doing their signing ceremony tomorrow from 1 to 2. And so if any board members, I think, you know, if you have that opportunity, take it in. I know everyone's got tough schedules. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is just note the passing of a former staff member of our district, worked with our district quite a number of years, but Cheryl Dick, who I just had the great fortune to work with for quite a number of years at Denali. She was our attendance secretary, but made that front office such a welcoming place, working with our front office team, our school team, that she touched many people's lives. And just thoughts and prayers with her and her family, and just noting that she made a difference for many, many people. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
Thank you. As we heard from the administration previously this evening, teachers should be letting their parents know there is a big controversial issue. I also find it, this shouldn't take more than 2 minutes, I also find it to be appropriate and actually a duty of board members to do the same in regards to the community and parents. With that being said, I believe I will take my 2 minutes and read a book that is found in our libraries in our Fairbanks North Star Borough School District. Just 2 or 3 excerpts. This book is from Kevin Kwan, and the name of the book is Sex and Vanity. Kissing her throat, her neck, letting his mouth linger as she reached for him urgently. They lay on the bench and he kissed her for what seemed like an eternity. But Lucy didn't want it to ever stop. And as his fingers and lips found her breasts and tortured her so exquisitely, she found herself pushing his head down, 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 until her diaphanous skirt pulled around his head, and she could feel his stomach graze her inner thigh.
Mr. Sampson?
Point of order. There is a process if one has concern with books that should be followed.
There's no concern here. Is there?
I think that your point is very, very understood. And I understand what you're saying and what you're doing. And quite frankly, that makes me personally feel uncomfortable. And I know, was that in the high school?
I can tell you that if it's good for the
Point of
goose,
order, this
it's
is
good for
closing
the
comments.
gander. It's in our schools.
This is closing comments.
If the kids can read it, I don't see what the problem is with reading a couple excerpts from a book.
When a member calls point of order, the board chair needs to rule on that point of order.
But if it's too inappropriate for the school board, but it's appropriate for the kids, I don't know what to say.
I'm going to uphold the point of order. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's not falling on deaf ears, Mr. Sampson. Ms. Sanderson.
Yes, thank you, President Luke. The Diversity Committee will have a meeting on 28th, 5:30 to 7. And also, I wanted to congratulate those students who science project went to district. The one who that was on the link, I had the pleasure, this is my 3rd year being a judge for the U Park science fair, and I actually judged that project. It was quite in depth. What brought my attention to it first was a teacher, Mr. Roon. I was an aide in his classroom at Barnett, and he was always talking about his hunting and his gourmet recipes dealing with the link. So I found it fascinating that some of the students, quite a lot, almost 12, maybe 8 to 12 students, they prepared an in-depth data on the link, its habitat, cycles that it went through. It had a tan pelt and an unpanned tan pelt. And each of the students in the room all did a freehand illustration. So when I questioned them about, what was their model, they said they looked on YouTube and they followed whatever this YouTube artistic thing was. And the renditions were just fascinating to see students go that in depth. They had a pictures along with their several notebooks. So they had opinions in their notebooks of what they had found. They had individual study guides. So it was a huge project, but I spent quite a lot of time, and normally you have a criteria sheet or a protocol sheet. I filled that out, but I really felt that I should just share with them how in-depth, how thorough their entire presentation was. And so I basically wrote on my phone a summary of what I learned in just being a judge for that presentation. And I just marvel at what our students do. Again, they continue to just excel under some crazy, crazy circumstances. Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. The Board Curriculum Committee met, and we have made a lot of progress discussing the process for supplemental sex education materials, and there's a meeting tomorrow, on Thursday. And I wrote down 3 times and still said tomorrow. It's like a habit. On the 21st at 5:30, and that process and guidance will be finalized to be sent forward to the board at that time. So if anyone's interested, you can attend by Zoom or in person. Thank you.
Ms. Marati?
First, I would like to respectfully request that our board chair and other board members that are interested seek out professional development when it comes to Robert's Rules of Order so that we can facilitate these meetings appropriately. Next, I wanted to announce that the board parent engagement committee meeting is April 27th. And then also thank those that advocated for the borough to adequately fund the school district this year, and to remind them that they have opportunities to testify on April 28th and May 5th. And again, the district board chair, Mr. DeGraw, Mrs. Moline, will be presenting to the Borough Finance Committee on April 21st at 5:30. And you can tune into those via Zoom, or you can attend them in person. Thanks.
Mr. Rhodes?
I have a few things for today. I first want to give a shout out to the organization I'm part of, Region 6 Student Council. We're going to Kodiak, or some of us are, for the statewide student council event where we vote on issues and address topics that may or may not be controversial. West Valley and North Pole will be holding their proms this Saturday as well. I, for one, know North Pole's prom is going to be great because Olivia Smith has been doing tons of hard planning, and I've sat there and listened to their committee meeting and have said, wow, good job. Just want to give a shout out to West Valley and North Pole for holding the proms, and thank you.
Ms. Moline?
I have nothing.
I want to thank the board for the work that we've done and the administration. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Anyone object? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned.